Mover and seconder to accept the apologies. Thank you, Councillor Marai and Councillor Somerville. All those in favour, please say yes.
Yes.
Those contrary, please say no. I declare the motion carried. Are there any requests for leave of absence?
5th of June, 5th of August.
5th of June.
Maybe Skyping in on either end of those time frames.
Yes.
From the 17th of July until the 31st of August.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Are there any others?
I beg your pardon. 1st of August.
1st of August?
Yes, please.
To?
So 17th of July until the 1st of August.
Ah, right. And for myself, from the 19th of June to the Friday, I think it's about the 26th of June. But it's likely I'll come in online. Can I please have a mover and seconder to agree to the leave of absence?
Councillor Spragan.
And Councillor Feast. All those in favour, please say yes.
Yes.
Contrary, no. The motion carried. Are there any conflicts of interest to be declared in relation to the items on the agenda?
Please. Thank you. I will declare a conflict of interest in relation to the Floating Sauna on the basis that I was part of the community board that made the decision to support the application from the applicant. I do, however, have no pecuniary interest in this project at all, and so would request to remain in the room and be part of the discussion, but I'll opt not to vote.
Thank you. Any other which councillors have a conflict? No? Are there any additional items? No? Carry on. So you would have read the confirmation of read the council minutes for the 22nd of April. So can we have a mover please that the council confirms the minutes as a true and correct record of the meeting held on the 22nd of April. And Councillor Keast. All those in favour, please say yes. Those to the contrary, declare the motion carried. And there's no public participation. Okay, so that takes us straight into the first report on page 9. So this is the updated Murihiku Southland Climate Change Impact Assessment. And I believe, Rochelle, we have staff or help from the Environment Southland. So we have Dan Morrison, Chris Jenkins and thank you. So would you like to take us through the report?
Through you, Madam Chair. The report today is to present you with the updated impact assessment for Murihiku Southland, which outlines how climate change could impact our region and our district in the coming decades under different global warming scenarios based on current climate models. So thank you to Chris Jenkins, the Principal Scientist Hydrology, and Karen Wilson, the General Manager Science and Environment Southland, for joining us here today. We also have the co-chair of the Regional Climate Change Working Group, Councillor Phil Morrison, available to answer questions after the presentation. Just before we move into Chris's presentation, and you would have received the slide deck circulated by email yesterday, just to highlight the application of this information in various council, interagency and regional work streams, its relevance to the long-term plan, climate change risk assessment for our organisation, and natural hazards assessment and spatial planning. So at the end of this presentation, we would welcome your feedback regarding key concerns that you have arising from this assessment and opportunities to communicate and socialise this information with the community. I'll pass over to Chris.
I'm going to skip a few slides, as I understand they've already been circulated.
Shall we try that? Skip forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the report concentrates on emissions-based climate change, and I think it's important to clarify the difference between climate change and extreme weather. So climate change is a long-term trend. It happens over decades. It's not a single event. And we can see here on this slide, we have a air temperature site up at the Talus Flats at altitude, and over about 30 years here we can see a steady increase in the annual temperature. And then we've got below that an extreme weather event. So these occur typically over a few hours to days. And this is an example at that same location of a heat wave that's lasting around about a month. So the connection between these is that, like climate change, it acts as a threat multiplier. It makes extreme weather more common, intense, and damaging. Something else to consider that's not in the report is some of these natural oscillations that influence climate and weather. So we've got 3 natural oscillations that typically affect weather in Southland. You've probably heard of the El Nino Southern Oscillation. This is a 2 to 7 year cycle in the Pacific Ocean. It has 3 phases: El Nino, La Nina and neutral. So during El Nino, we tend to get more flooding in summer, and La Nina, we tend to get warm weather and droughts. We also have the southern annular mode, where this is responsible for about 15 to 30% of our climate variability. It's a bout of winds that circulate around Antarctica, and they move northward and southward, and they can cause quite severe weather events, particularly when it moves to the north. And then we've got the interdecadal Pacific Oscillation, which is a longer scale oscillation lasting typically 20 to 30 years. Its main thing is that it affects the number of El Ninos and La Ninas that we have. So during periods of positive phase, we tend to get more flooding, higher magnitude floods, more frequent, and then we get more droughts during the negative phase. Sorry. So anyway, the key messages from the report are that across all the climate scenarios, Southland's projected to become warmer than the reference period, which is 1995 to 2014. So all comparisons are to this time period. Average temperatures are expected to increase by about 1 degree by mid-century and roughly 2 to 3.5 by the end of the century. And this is going to put pressure on freshwater ecosystems, potentially leading to water quality issues, and it could impact on potable water supply. The important thing is this warming trend is consistent across every climate model. We're going to see warmer temperatures, more heat waves associated with that, so probably an extra 12 to 35 days of heat waves. And this could cause problems for road surfaces, like cause softening and damage to bitumen, and there'll also be an increase in the risk of wildfire, and there'll be a longer fire season. Frosts are going to be, they're going to decline significant, and by the end of the century, we could experience 25 to 45 fewer frost days per year. But for agriculture, that means long growing seasons, changes to pasture growth, and potential for new crops. But it also brings warmer winters, which can allow pests, weeds, and plant diseases to expand. Annual rainfall across Southland is projected to increase by about 5% mid-century and up to 10 to 13% by late century. And the number of rainy days, it's expected to remain pretty much the same, but this indicates that extra rainfall is going to fall during intense rainfall events. There's going to be some changes across locations and seasons. So these are just general figures. So we'll get into some specifics of some areas shortly. The modelling suggests the largest rainfall increases will occur in winter and spring. Summer rainfall's a bit more uncertain. It may increase in some areas but decrease in others, which means we could experience wetter winters but still also have those dry periods in summer. One of the clearest findings is that the heavy rainfall events are likely to become more intense throughout Southland, and large one-day storms are projected to increase in magnitude, which increases the likelihood of flooding, surface water runoff, erosion, and it's going to put pressure on stormwater and wastewater systems. Some catchments, we're going to see annual flood magnitudes rise significantly under higher emission scenarios. For example, the Aparima catchment is going to have floods around about 60% larger for the one-day event. Hydrological modelling indicates that flood flows in most Southland rivers will increase, and this has implications for flood protection schemes, infrastructure design and floodplain planning. Climate change is also going to make our river systems more variable. This means higher flows during heavy rainfall, possible reductions in low flows during dry periods, and more variability between seasons. So in some catchments that could affect water supply reliability for potable water, irrigation and other uses. Snow is forecast to decline sharply with around about 50% reduction in snow volume by mid-century, and the snow line is projected to rise by several hundred metres. Sea levels going to continue to rise across all the different emission scenarios. So this will result in more coastal flooding. Storm surges are going to reach further inland, and some of the infrastructure such as roading, water intakes and other buried infrastructure are going to be at risk from erosion and saltwater intrusion. Also, the number of coastal properties exposed is going to increase over time. Sea surface temperatures around New Zealand are projected to increase, and this warming may lead to more marine heat waves, changes in marine ecosystems, and also impacts on fisheries and aquaculture. And these marine heat waves are expected to become more frequent and longer lasting over time. So I'll do a quick summary on some of the key towns in the district. Just be aware that these are annual averages, so there will still be inter-annual variability. So starting with Lumsden, we've got a forecast increase in temperature of 1 to 1.4 degrees by 2050, and an additional 10 to 14 hot days and 7 to 8.5 days spent in heatwave per year. And we're going to see a decline in frost days of 16 to 19 days, and an increase of 0.3 to 0.8 dry days, and an additional 1 very wet days. Te Anau, also an increase of 1 to 1.3 degrees, additional 6 to 8 hot days, and also 6 to 8 hot days spent in heatwave. We're going to see a decline of 22 to 25 frost days, and an increase of 0.6 to 1.8 dry days, and an additional 2 to 3 very wet days. Also, the snow line is forecast to rise 210 to 250 metres. Riverton's going to see an increase in sea level of around about 0.21 to 0.23 metres, and with storm surge, there's going to be an increased risk of erosion and inundation of coastal roads. It will also see an increase of temperature about 1 to 1.3 degrees Celsius, an additional 7 to 10 hot days, and an additional 5.3 to 6.3 days spent in heat wave. There's going to be a decline of 11 to 14 frost days, and an additional 0.8 to 2.3 wet days. Winton has forecast temperature also of 1 to 1.3 degrees Celsius, an additional 9 to 13 hot days, and an additional 5.9 to 7.2 days spent wave. See a decline of 12 to 15 frost days, and an increase up to 0.6 dry days, and an additional 0.9 to 1.2 very wet days. So the Waikaia catchment, it's actually forecast to have a decrease of rainfall up to 10% in the Garvey Mountains, and the days under meteorological drought could increase by 20 days. Flood magnitude is projected to decrease for the headwaters of the Waikaia River. This is one of the few where that is forecast to happen, and the snow line is projected to rise by 260 to 300 metres. So the future of Southland experience is going to depend heavily on global greenhouse gas emissions. The modelling considers several possible global futures. So under higher emissions, warming's greater, sea level rises more, and rainfall extends further. So in other words, the choices the world is making about the emissions will strongly influence the scale of climate change experienced in Southland. So taken together, the science points to a clear pattern, and the climate's going to become warmer, more variable, and more prone to extreme weather events. These changes are going to affect agriculture, water management, flood risk, coastal communities, and natural ecosystems. But importantly, most of these changes aren't immediate, which means there's time for us to plan and adapt. Questions?
Chris, I guess it's noting that this assessment is a refresh of the assessment that occurred in 2018.
Yes, that's correct.
And just a question for me, I guess your report's highlighting the key messages in that report, because I understand there's 4 volumes, I think, to read through, which I guess many of us won't have had a chance to read through, and that this will be considered further in regional forum in conjunction with our long-term planning. But the question was, is this a continuation of the trends in the 2018 report, or is a significant change to what was projected in 2018 to now that we need to consider?
There are some small changes. So, for example, the air temperature forecasts for a little bit warmer now, whereas the rainfall is slightly lower. So there are some differences, but we are dealing with much improved data and global climate models.
So just through you, Madam Chair, one of the key reasons why we did the update from the 2018 report is to expand on the scope of the 2018 report, in particular to do a much more thorough and deeper dive into the hydrology impacts to inform a range of work going on in the region. So that was one of the key drivers for doing that work.
Thank you. Other questions?
I have a few questions, comments actually, but I think I'll reserve them for when we actually get to that part of the answer. When we actually get the paper?
At a later time?
No, today, but when we start on the motion, I'll have my debate then.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks very much for this report. You talk about the models for the climate change and the weather. Are they different models to the ones that predict the weather 1 or 2 days out? Because I notice there's some variability there, and we're going out a lot further than those. So what gives us confidence that there's some accuracy around these models versus some of the more current forecasting models?
Okay, so these models, there are 6 global climate models. So they are using data from the past, and basically they are applying known information from how the atmospheric models work and then applying a temperature change to that. So they're very similar models, using the same science, but with projections based on emissions-based warming. The models that are predicting a few days into the future, they have like probabilities that slowly drop off over a few days based on data that we're currently seeing. You have high confidence in a day and the next day, and then it slowly drops off. They are very different from these long-term climate models, which are basically using a baseline and then applying 20 years of reference data to that. The science behind it, the strong confidence in that, but there will be variability.
Okay, so thank you. The current, or the 2-3 day forecast that we have now, we appreciate the forecast, but we accept that they're not necessarily going to be completely accurate. So the 20-year forecast, do we adopt a similar approach to that? We think perhaps here's our best guess, not necessarily going to be accurate.
Can I interject? I'll answer that question. So first of all, happy to forward some further information if people are interested in the difference between weather forecasting and climate change, projections. In terms of the how confident we are that these scenarios are going to play out in the future. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty involved, and so that's why it's important to really monitor the situation, to consider a range of different scenarios, to have the ability to adapt and change quickly.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Any other
Through you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Bowen?
Southland's obviously based on its primary production, and more recently we're looking at major capital investment and infrastructure into our aquaculture industry. And you mentioned in there the potential impacts on that. These basically form the basis of our GDP for the region and for the country at large. Do you see, can you identify any potential risks or opportunities associated with that?
With aquaculture,
Or both sectors, like with the primary sector, in terms of, you've mentioned that there's change in rainfall, there's change in growing degree days of heat, potential crop changes that can create risks. It can also create opportunities. We might have to look at things like infrastructure into water storage in those dry periods, as an example. But also, if we're investing billions into the aquaculture industry based on the modelling that we have now, if those changes occur between now and 2050, are there opportunities or risks affiliated with those in terms of changes of species or market changes and so on and so forth? Have you got any commentary around that?
So through them, Chair, you're absolutely right. There are implications that need to be considered. I guess this report is the information that will inform some of that consideration. So we've now got pretty dense information to work through, and we're in that process now. So of having received this information, working through what the implications might be with the likes of Great South, SDC staff and other agencies working in their spaces. So don't have an answer for you yet, other than to say that people are working on that.
Several opportunities to consider that information over the interagency meeting and future council meetings as well. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to wait until we actually put the motion, but seeing others have got the ball rolling. NEVA is now called Earth Sciences since last year. I think we need to advance, and I'm not just going on your presentation because I've gone through the report of roughly 700 odd pages of that report, and I've gone through that and seeing that the projections they put there. Now, we are in 2026. Am I correct when I say that this report that has come out is from AR6 2021 report, and these models right now are based on CMIP6? Is that correct? So as it is, this science is 5 years behind where it should be. Now, CMIP, for anyone who's unaware, is your coupled model intercomparison project. This one is CMIP 6 that went with AR6 that came in 2021. AR7 is currently being worked upon. And last month, on the 6th of April, came their paper, because they always put one out before that, what scenarios are they going to use for the next one. And I'll quote, because that paper was on the Copernicus website. This one, first of all, for the 21st century, this range will be smaller than assessed before. On the high end of the range, the CMIP6 high emission levels, quantified by SSP 5-8.5, have become implausible. The paper went on, and I'll quote again. It says, clearly, the cumulative amount of fossil fuel use in the high emission scenario are considerably larger than the total estimated reserve. So they are themselves admitting that the very underlying basis of those assumptions don't stand. And yet we have Earth Sciences New Zealand giving us this report, 700 pages of it. This is a department that has close to 800 staff, an annual budget of just under $200 million, and we expect our ratepayers to consider this data as the most recent science. And then, because I went to what we have in a council document, that's just 3 pages, unless, of course, you click through to the ES website, and the infographic there. There is no conditions placed on that infographic. The 12% more rainfall on 2090 relies on the upper end, RCP 8.5, that has been dropped. 19 extra days comes strictly from the upper end of the old scenario. 45 fewer frosts, again, not the middle of the road. And that headline, 3.4 degrees of warming, it is explicitly SSP 5, RCP 8.5. And RCP 8.5 came out, I mean, the predecessor of it came out when I was in my 20s. I'm heading to 50 now. It's a 20-plus-year-old model, which came that time with the caveat not to be used for policy making. Some of those outlandish assumptions, 6 times global coal consumption, atmospheric carbon dioxide to touch almost 1,200 parts per million. For context, for the last 300 years since the Industrial Revolution, the world population has gone from about 700 million to nearly 8 billion. Everything, in the mass industrialization, globalization, all of this technology has advanced so much, as have civilizations and living standards, and all that is increased in carbon dioxide levels has gone up from about 280 parts per million to the current 420. It's just a 50% increase. We are told to believe this report that somehow RCP 8.5, 1,100 parts per million, just in the next 50, 60, 80 years, it will triple the carbon dioxide levels. And when it comes to coastal modeling, I can't give that a free pass either. It was about 3 years ago when I sat here and I was told that we are going to do all our sea level rise modeling based only and only on RCP 8.5, the highest emission scenario, which is clearly now told not to be used. And we have, because we don't have the exact figures, our council website says 760 plus properties now have their land information memorandums tainted with the sea level rise modeling based on a scenario that is not supposed to be used. If I extrapolate, because I don't know where those figures lie, just by the maps, roughly 70% of those properties lie around Winton. 70% of about 800 is 500. So half of Winton's properties now contain a sea level rise model hazard on their limb that shouldn't be there. And no one even questions the NZ sea rise model too, which has just used data from 2003 to 2011. 8 years of earthquake sea level rise data to extrapolate till the end of the century. How does that make sense? If I currently look at the NZ sea rise tool that is being extensively used, it ignores that Christchurch is still subsiding, underestimating the flood risk. It seems to be unaware of the fact that Kaikoura has risen after the earthquake and overestimates that risk. Our communities count on us to do the right thing. We currently can see the Kapiti Coast District Council has been yet again this week pulled into court. Timaru has placed, using the same warnings, it has put same RCP level 8.5, it has put warnings, flood level warnings on 16,000 of its 21,000 properties. I don't think this is the best use. Earth Sciences needs to be told either you catch up with the modeling, catch up with the scenarios that are being done. I mean, the modelers, either they catch up with the science or they just shut shop. This is unacceptable to be doing this today and telling our ratepayers that, yep, this is the latest science. I don't blame you. You're just a messenger, and this is what Earth Sciences has done. But this is not right. That is why, I mean, this paper is completely unacceptable where I'm concerned.
Thank you, Councillor Marai. Before I move to Mayor Scott for a comment, is it possible in the light of Councillor Marai's comments, not expecting you to provide an extensive answer now, but that be taken away and be considered in the further discussion ahead, whether it be with the interagency forum or the regional forum, or come back to us and with a response to those comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, if there are some specific questions or points that your Councillor Bupara or others would like us to respond to, then please.
My answer is just one. Why are we using models based on CMIP 6 when CMIP 7, the paper is out, already says the top two, the ones we are using, SSP 5 RCP 8.5 and SSP 3.0 7.0 should not be used. Because we'll constantly keep just chasing the science. We'll never completely catch up. Thank you.
We can respond to that question.
Thank you. Mayor Scott?
Thanks, Councillor Menzies. It's a hard act to follow. I support what Councillor Bopara is saying around that modelling stuff, and I'm just thinking about the practicalities of this type of work, particularly in relation to our spatial planning work that we're doing, and when we're looking at that adaptation piece around the river management. Have we got that hydrology data coming through? Like, is this kind of work going to inform that important work that's going to help us to actually do that spatial planning properly, where we're going to be building infrastructure and looking at stuff and getting into gravel management of the rivers and that kind of thing as well? So we're getting a balanced kind of look. And I was just over in Norway and talking to a council over there, and their water management system has been effective for 120 years, and now every year it's failing. So yes, there is more rainfall happening, the climate's changing, it's been changing for years. I've said it before, if you go up at the back of Tom's place, you can see what it used to look like out in the Garston Valley many years ago. But I think we need to actually focus on the practical stuff that we can actually do and need to do when we're doing that long-term planning. And I'd like to see this work kind of go into inform that. So sorry, quite a long mixture of a question and a statement, but yeah, it just concerns me that we're not getting into the tangible, on the ground, doing the stuff that we need to do for the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I think those comments are noted by yourselves and Environment Southland. Thank you.
Yeah, my question was before Jaspreet spoke, so it might not make as much sense in context now, but this is essentially, we're talking about a trends report. Is that right? So this is an update from 2018, so we're looking at the differences and we're updating our data on that. Was there a report before 2018, or is 2018 the first one we've had?
So through you, Madam Chair, so there are national reports. I think there might have been an earlier national report, but 2018 was the first regional report. So
and then just listening to Jaspreet, so am I right in saying that, because there was a lot of acronyms in there, the methodology that we're using is older? And
specifically, the two models that we are using are not to be used any longer.
And so my next thing is, when's the next report due? And obviously, if you're doing a trends report, you want your methodology to be updated, but obviously measuring the same stuff. So my question is essentially, when is the next report due? And following on from Jaspreet, is that going to be using relatively as up-to-date as possible methodology to make sure that is accurate? And how much of this do we measure ourselves, or are we using it from others' information?
Through you, Madam Chair, we'll come back to you on that question.
And I just want to add to that. I'm not saying that any of the stuff here is necessarily wrong or inaccurate. I'm just following on from what Jaspreet says, that actually if we're using a methodology and models that we've been told that we're not to use anymore, then we can't get, there's nothing for us to fall back on, essentially.
So thank you, and obviously a clear comment that you'll come back to us with more information in relation to those concerns. So we've got Councillor Byers with a question, and Councillor Weston, and Fabuti.
Thanks.
If I go to Fabuti first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So can I suggest that the team will come back with the answers, but to the point that's been raised by Councillor Marai, does the council want to suggest to the Climate Change Working Group to look at what the underlying assumptions are? Can they be updated? And then lead into the question of when's the next review? Can that use updated information, or is there a reason why we have to stick with the other one? So that kind of gives them a bit.
If I may answer, the team at Earth Sciences, they have previously worked on AR6. They have people within them who are working on AR7. They are collaborating in part of New Zealand. Let them just put their pen to paper and tell us that we should not be using these two models. Explicitly, it is out there now on 6th of April.
Sure.
And
So
other countries are updating theirs rapidly. We are supposed to somehow live in a vacuum from 2025.
We have a number of matters we need to consider today, so I think we do need to move the conversation on. I will come back to each of the councillors, but I think clearly we need to make another time for further information to come back for discussion at the council meeting. And Councillor Byers, you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Well, some of that information I'd like to come back is what Jaspreet seemed to be saying about the flood level sea rise modelling, and I gathered that that top scenario was based on more reserves that are in the ground. So could you just clarify that when you come back, and also the impact on the properties? Has there been an impact on the limbs based on that information?
It's on our website, Councillor Byers. 760 plus.
And one more quick thing. Did you say 60% increase in flood rise in the Aparima?
That's for the one-day event.
One-day event, 60% higher than what we've had?
The average mean annual flood.
60% greater than what we've had before?
Than the average mean annual flood. So it doesn't mean a single event. All of the floods are averaged out over the time period that they're being recorded.
And the average is going to go up by 60%?
Yes, for the mean annual flood.
Councillor Byers, we note that further information will come. Councillor Weston.
Just a brief one, because I know time's precious. I just want to say that I support both Councillor Marai and Mayor Rob. The key thing is no one's denying climate change. We are seeing a warming period. There's lots of arguments about causal, and I'd be a CO2 denier. I'm happy to say that. However, the one that concerns me, and protection, particularly waterways and that, is apparent to all. We do see more significant effects from flooding. The sea level wise, I think, is not substantiated at all, and I just passed the comment. I've talked to residents that have been in Riverton for 60 plus years, and they've seen no net effect of water rise to date. Now, I know they're saying it's 0.25 or so metres in 2050, but the evidence isn't there. That's all I want to add.
Did you have a question, Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, just in regards to the fundamentals of the report, I think some of the touch points that came out were things like increased road washouts, increased floods. Those are the kind of things that if that information and advice is founded, then there's a responsibility to act on the bits of infrastructure that we're in control of. In regards to the methodology on reporting, I know that our regional climate change strategy is that we align on the scenarios and kind of the metrics that we're using. So that's kind of the discussion that I'm hearing from today, is we need to figure out, like, what is that scenario that we're basing the modelling and reporting on. That needs to align between councils as the agreement, but I'm interested to know what scenarios are the insurance companies using for their risk assessments, because really that's where we should be looking at aligning as well. So that's definitely the information that needs to come back, is what is the metrics we're balancing on. I'm a bit more observational, where I look at one of the touch points being increased sea temperature. Well, I see species of fish off the west coast that didn't used to be there 10 years ago. So there is on the ground observation. So when I see a report that says expect increased road washouts, we need to know that our metrics we're measuring that statement from are correct and aligned across the board, but we also need to respond to addressing increased road washouts. So while I support, let's make sure our fundamental baselines are aligned and check that we're doing the correct ones, and maybe take a sense from, well, what are the insurance companies stepping away from insuring complete townships? What metric are they basing those decisions on? But as far as the reacting to the core pieces of concern that come out of this report, we still also just need to look at those things. Like, pressures on the water resource is a pretty important thing to consider as deliverers of water infrastructure. But yeah, we also need to know that we're all talking on the same science page, which we're not all scientists of, but we can't get too hung up around having the perfect data, when ultimately all the scenarios are also suggesting that some of the same concerns lie.
Councillor Wilson, and as said earlier, there will be further discussion around the long-term planning, which will take into account some of the points that you've been referred to. All right, now discussion finished. Yes, we can. We've got a recommendation that we note the information contained in the report, and it sounds like we have another addition to that, which I suggest could be that a further report come to council that addresses a question raised today in relation to the report. When do you think that might be possible?
Madam Chair, my suggestion would be that you refer that to the Climate Change Working Group, because that's your arrangement to look at it, and ask them to report back as soon as possible, because we'd have to check and we could do that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I make a suggestion then that we leave the report on the table?
I'd agree with that.
Sorry, that's easy. Yep. I'm getting a sense of agreement around the table.
Through you, Madam Chair, I just want to comment, if I may. While I agree in principle with what's been said today, I also feel pretty strongly about not replicating or going over reports again and again based on the current data that we've been given through Great South and through so while we can go back and we can go through and have a bit of conversation around that, I'd like to think that the data that's been given to us to date, there's been a lot of time and money and effort and energy put into that space, and I want it noted that that from my perspective in particular, I feel quite happy with the data, and that I just don't want to be going backwards in this space.
Thank you for those comments, and noted.
So I just want to respond, as far as that coming back to the working group for discussion makes sense, but I don't understand the working group set, which scenario that study should be done under. So it wasn't under like an advisement of the group if that's the scenarios that the study should be done under. So it's not really that working group's place to then ask for it to be redone under different scenarios. I think that's putting a little bit, making an assumption of what the group would be able to enforce at the other end. It was EES had done that.
So through you, Madam Chair, just to respond that Environment Southland went through that working group and also went directly to the TAs in the region in order to scope up this work, including getting input on what scenarios should go into this report. So while the report was commissioned by Environment Southland and overseen by Environment Southland, it involved input and advice from all of the councils in the region. So and hence, it's also been reported back to all those councils that were involved in its commissioning.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for someone to move that the report lie on the
Councillor
table.
Graney moved and Councillor Beaupre seconded.
Right, we do have to know so that you should be any further discussion? Okay. Thank you. All those in favour, please say yes. Yes. Those with contrary, say no. Thank you. The motion carries. So we move on to notification of plan changes 2 and 3 becoming operative. And that is on page 15. And thank you, Gavin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I take the report as read. It's an information paper about the process for plan change at Turn 3 becoming operative. The notification has been approved by the GM Strategy and Partnerships under delegation. I'm happy to take any questions on the process.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. The recommendation is that we note the information contained in the report. So can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Westman, and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Spregan. All those in favour, please say yes. Yes. To the contrary, no. Declare the motion carried. So we now move to page 17 of the report, and we have Fabuti able to speak to that report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is in response to Council's request that the costs of the October 25 event be brought to Council. While I have compiled the report, the information has come from both Finance and Sam's team. So Anne and Sam are here if we have any detailed questions. A couple of key things. This report is focused on the costs. So what have we incurred? Not all costs, particularly in the facilities area, have come in to date. So there is still some bits and pieces that are coming through. And that would be because as we've progressed through, we found other things and or we haven't got the course and things like that. So this is as of the date of the writing of the report. That would be it, Chair, from me.
So you've advised that there will be a detailed report coming at some stage, probably the next month, but you won't be aware of when you will have all the information in this time.
That's correct, Madam Chair. I would suggest, and jump in if you need to, is that we possibly would do that after year end, was the suggestion, so that we've got all of the costs for pertaining to the year, revenue sources from where we have funded those, and any other discussion that might need to happen around that would come through as part of that side of reporting. And yes, that would contain more details.
Opportunity to consider what the costs are to date for your information only. Any questions? Thank you, Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question, do we know at this stage how much of this was insurable?
So, through you, Madam Chair, the 171,000 rounded off, that's what has been in discussion with insurance so far that they have committed. So that's in the facilities line. Plus the 40K has just come in, or 41K has just come in a couple of days, so we haven't had that discussion. So it could be plus 40, so 210, I would say.
Any other queries?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Biddy. I'm aware that Emergency Management Southland is surveying Southlanders at the moment around this event and other events which are going to occur. With the results of those surveys coming through, would Council be receptive to using that information to help plan or make changes for the future, or help to mitigate against, I guess, ways that we can do things a little bit better. Will we be able to access that information, do you think, from Emergency Management Southland to kind of help with future planning and reporting and cost saving and so on?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm sure we can. So Emergency Management Southland is a CCO of council, so I'm sure we'll be able to access any information that they've got and use that for our planning purposes.
Thank you. And I just note that our community boards are interested in seeing how, I guess, the practicalities and the pragmatism when we have an emergency event of how they can support or procure in their areas in conjunction with the emergency centre. So it's also looking to future resilience. Any other questions? Thank you, and thank you, Prabuti and other Sam and Anne for your work on being able to bring this report to us at this time. We have asked questions over the last wee while, so I appreciate that it's been difficult for you to get the information together, and this is an interim way is helpful. Thank you. All right, so our recommendation that we note the information in the report. Please have a mover. Thank you, Councillor Ryan, and seconder, Councillor Marai. All those in favour, please say yes. Yes. Contrary, no. I declare the motion carried. Okay. Our next report on page 21 is the Winton RSA Hall unbudgeted expenditure and redistribution of better off funding. So Jared,
yeah, Karen's on leave today, so apologies for that. Thank you, Wish. I'd just like to acknowledge the you gave to the team, particularly community facilities. We've had that October wind event. It was a massive response that was required, particularly around the addressing of the fallen trees. So thank you for that acknowledgement for the team. This report, all I'd like to do is introduce Jared, who's mentioned he's covering for Karen today. There's a fair bit of content in the report, but hopefully the principles are relatively self-explanatory.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I will take the report as read. I know there's 5 parts or recommendations from the board for council to approve and redistribution of funding from better off funding from Memorial Hall in Winton through to the RSA Hall in Winton. And I think through the years from 22 to now, there have been some conversations around scope changes, etc., which and the criteria was to move the long-term plan, the project and the long-term plan forward. I think before the discussions, there was a bit of a, that got lost and we can move that project, so now we need to redistribute the funds. The Memorial Hall, the project scope was reduced, and then obviously the focus has been on the RSA Hall, but I'll take any questions.
Thank you. And I think it is certainly within the report contains the information that we need to make decisions. So questions, and in fact, Councillor Summerall, we might want to start with you and add, given that you're part of the community board.
Yeah, it looks pretty ugly and messy, the mucking around there, but it does make sense at the end of the day when you look at it. And I suppose the question I actually spoke to the other day regarding about why we didn't take the funding 24-25 is even though it probably didn't make that much difference at the end of the day the way it's come out, but it was just that was the only question I had around it. But it achieves everything the board wants to achieve, and we get there in the end, and I think it's a pretty good result that we end up with. So,
thank you. Yes, I think while a matter might have been overlooked in relation to being able to proceed with the Memorial Hall upgrade or the work that is occurring there, it is being refocused to another hall in Winton, of which already extensive work was being planned to upgrade. Any other queries? All right, so we will move to the resolution. So we have down to H there. So we're noting the information contained in the report, noting the matter of decision is assessed as being some importance but not significant. Determines that we've complied with the decision-making requirements of the Local Government Act, and then moving on to D, we are endorsing the recommendation of the Reti Community Board to approve unbudgeted expenditure of $51,797 for the Winton RSA Hall budget, increasing the total budget to $91,797. Endorses the recommendation of the Reti Community Board to approve the redistribution of better off funding to the Winton RSA Hall project of $76,667 from the Winton Memorial Hall project. Endorses the recommendation of the Reti Community Board to approve the redistribution of better off funding to the Winton RSA Hall project of $15,130 from the Royal Bush Hall project, and endorses the recommendation of the Reti Community Board that the Winton Memorial Hall project of up to $30,000 be funded by the Winton Community Centre Reserve, and the Council endorses the recommendation of the Reti Community Board that any remaining better off funding be used to fund the Winton RSA Hall project. So it sounds complex, but the Reti Community Board, and they have agreed to this as well. So any further discussion?
Just noting, it's great that it was approved as a lump sum instead of having to go back to DIA for this, just for Reti halls.
Exactly.
We have informed DIA and they're happy that we're doing this too, so we've got an email to cover that.
That's great.
That's the other
We could
essential
do this.
element. Can I please have a mover? Yes, thank you, Councillor Somerville, and Councillor Dobson. Okay. All those in favour, please say yes.
Yes.
To the contrary, no. I declare the motion carried. Okay, we move on to deliberations on the submissions for the proposed licence. Sauna, and we're on to page 27. And we have Megan. This is an extensive process, and the council's had the opportunity on the 8th of April to begin to now and hear those who wish to present on these submissions. And in addition, there are a number of other submissions as well. So we have those in the report before us, along with other relevant reports, etc. So the councillors had the opportunity not only to consider all the submissions prior to the article, but again in relation to their presentation here for the meeting today. We'll move over to the report.
Thank you, Worship. Just a brief introduction from me. So firstly, thank you, Worship and councillors, for your time to consider this today. I'd like to briefly acknowledge the staff team. We have both Kevin and Megan here, and Megan will present the report. It has been a significant piece of work to receive 213 submissions or so and process those and get to the point today that we're at. As you mentioned, Your Worship, we've held the hearing in April in Te Anau. That was the hearing of submitters where we had 12 people present. Today is the day about deliberations and decisions. And with that, I'm going to hand over to the team, which is primarily Megan, to provide a bit more information for you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and councillors. So as you've heard, today we are here for Council to deliberate on the submissions received for the proposal to issue a licence to occupy Floating Sauna Limited for a floating pontoon with 2 saunas and a changing room on Lake Henry within Ivan Wilson Park in Fiona. I'll take this report as read. As you know, in October 2024, Floating Sauna Limited submitted an application to construct on council land and to also seek a commercial lease of a portion of Lake Henry within Ivan Wilson Recreation Reserve. The application was assessed against the Reserves Act requirements, and the applicant was advised that a licence to occupy would be more appropriate rather than a lease. In order for this application to be processed, the Reserves Act is quite prescriptive in the steps that have to occur before a licence can be granted. First is confirmation of the reserve status, in this case a recreation reserve. We confirm that the activity is in line with the specific reserve classification. Is the activity outside the classification on the reserve? We consider the reserve management plan. Is it in conformity and contemplated with the plan? In this case, it was not contemplated. We consult with other teams within council for their assessments, and in this case a resource consent was required. The Act states that if certain parameters are not met, then public notification is required. As resource consent was not publicly notified and the proposed activity is not contemplated within the reserve management plan, this public notification had to occur. As a result of this public notification notice, Council received submissions, and now Council, in your role as the administrating body, have to give full consideration to every submission. This is the step that we're at to today. Given the significant number of submissions and the numerous points within many which are duplicated across the submissions, this consideration is being undertaken on a theme basis, as opposed to each individual points in each submission. After you consider these submissions, if the decision is to grant the licence, then a report has to be submitted to the Minister of Conservation for the consent or approval. In this case, Council has been delegated that role to act on behalf of the Minister. The administering body, again you, has to provide a summary of all submissions received along with a statement as to the extent to which the submissions have been allowed or accepted or disallowed or not accepted. It should be noted, other than 3 late submissions, all of the submissions have been accepted for consideration. If the decision is to not grant the licence, then this process stops. So public notices were published from the 27th of February this year, and submissions were requested to be received over a 1-month period, which ended on the 26th of March. As a result, we received 213 submissions, 3 were late and not accepted. At the Council meeting on the 8th of April, 210 written submissions were received and 12 people spoke. Upon reading all the submissions, it soon becomes clear that specific themes were emerging. Because of the sheer numbers of these submissions and the varieties of matters covered, and after taking advice, it was decided to summarise these themes. They have been cross-referenced back to the individual submissions. These themes are listed in section 24 of the report and are to be read in conjunction with attachment H. You will have noticed that in this table is a staff recommendation of allowed or disallowed for each of the themes, and we are asking you to consider these themes, including those which have been recommended as disallowed, and to either agree or to change the recommendation. These changes can include part allowed or part disallowed. The reason we are asking you to do that is that the decision is to ultimately approve the licence, then as described before, we have to submit a report with your decision on each submission. This is required by legislation to be undertaken. That said, Council's decision on the licence is to be based on all submissions we have received in relation to this topic in conjunction with information provided by us. With regard to the drafted licence to occupy document, it is important to note that this is in accordance with the Reserves Act and it has been reviewed by Council's legal advisors. We acknowledge that several of the issues raised in the submissions have considerable merit, which could result in amended terms and conditions for the applicant to consider. Another pertinent issue is the topics that were covered by the resource consent process. You may have read the Commissioner's hearing decision and have seen the consent conditions. As has been set out in the report, this is a Reserve Management Act process, whereas we are now dealing with the required process under the Reserves Act. I'm pretty sure you may have some questions for us, and on that note, I have Kevin and Sam here to assist.
Thank you. And as Sam has indicated, your extensive work, Megan and Kevin, on this process. So I'll come to you in a minute. We have a number of attachments to the reports, and just as an initial comment, just wanted to note that with the resource consent process, that iwi have a view in the resource consent process, which is there for our information as well. And some of the matters they raised were not consent issues, but relating to the reserve management plan. So councillors all had an opportunity to read what they were requesting and their comments also. Rather than go into questions that might relate to the generality of the report, I'm proposing that we initially go to, as is asked of us, to consider and deliberate on each of the theme recommendations as is set out in the section 24. And I agree with you because I think that may take care of a number of the questions. And at the end of that time, if you have a question that hasn't been attended to, we raise it at that time. Will that work for people? Yes. Okay. And in order to do that, we need to refer to Appendix H, which is
page 607.
Page 607. Thank you, while I find that. And we will work our way through that in relation to the staff recommendations. Right, so we might start with the first one that's noted there, and that's on adverse effect on the amenity. So bullet pointed there, Megan, you have the effects or the issues that have been raised in the submission and a response around that, and so we can consider that. We would like to first.
No, that's the word. See, I can't even.
No comments? So the staff recommendation is we allow for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that, just to clarify, that means that we accept that there is an adverse effect on.
That's what I understand. Yes.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct.
No further questions? All right. I think it's probably easiest if we take a vote on each one of these.
No, just go through those and then we'll come back to the recommendations in the report.
Right, thank you. Right, with that advice, we'll move on then to adverse effect on the environment. So we've noted in there around the water quality, localised detrimental effect on aquatic life, water disturbance, fragile bogs surrounding the lake. The existing levees protect the fragile edges of the lake from foot traffic, damage to the lake, possible smoke conversion layer, smell of the smoke, pollution, footfall pathways, increased traffic. I think I noted in here, Megan, that you attempted to traverse the submissions and include every point in the submissions across these themes, but you are aware that there may be the occasional comment that you have missed, but there's always an opportunity to.
Through you, Madam Chair, that is 100% correct, and very happy to adjust these tables. Yes,
thank you. So the comment, many of the issues raised here are covered in the application and summarised in the section related to the non-compliance with Ivan Walton Park Reserve Management Plan, and this application has been granted a resource consent. Actual and potential adverse environmental effects were considered in that process. Various questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So because the resource consent has been granted, does that mean that we can't have a different view to that resource consent, the decision there?
The resource consent was considering environmental effects. This is in relation to the management plan and the submissions. You may want to comment further.
Yeah, the actual resource consent and what's in that and the decision is not what is open for discussion today. That was done under the Resource Management Act. What I would say is, though, that the granting of the resource consent does not automatically mean that we have to grant the licence as a landowner. They're two totally different considerations, and that the issues and the conversations today around council's role as the administering body
or the landowner, so to speak, of the property as to whether we are going to grant that licence or not to debate what's in the resource consent, because that has been done and dusted by an independent commissioner through the Resource Management Act. It's no different to a building consent or any other resource consent. Just because they're granted does not mean they can be put into effect unless the owner of the property that's actually it relates to is agreeable to put them into effect. That is what we are sitting here today considering as to whether council as the landowner to take that next step.
Councillor Wilson.
So can I just get clarity on what the table in this instance disallowed means? Is that meaning that we're not considering those submissions at this time? We're not allowing those points in the submission to be raised, and then would this still be forwarded through to Ministry of Conservation in the summary of submission?
As Megan set out, we are required to consider every submission, which is what we're saying to councils. You've got to consider every submission and you've got to consider every point. But for us to try and tabulate that was nigh on impossible. So we've had to work through the themes of the submissions. And if you'll see in the other attachment, there is a link between the individual submissions and the themes. So depending on what council's decisions are today in relation to each of the themes, that additional spreadsheet will be updated as to what council's, as the administering body's position is in related to those themes. In terms of allow or disallow, that's a statutory requirement of words that we are to undertake. The allow or disallow is the theme. And just because we're saying the recommendation is to disallow the theme, that does not mean that council doesn't consider the theme, doesn't consider all the submissions and looks at it and says, actually, we disagree with that and we want to change it, or we can part allow it or we can part disallow it. What we've tried to do here, particularly in Appendix H, is to summarise the detail of the points that make up the theme and our reasons why we are suggesting or recommending that that particular theme be disallowed, or part allowed or part disallowed, as the council so determines.
Well, on this particular case, I'd struggle to disallow the theme of adverse effect on the environment upon reviewing the submissions, reviewing that theme. That makes sense. So with that, if I was to propose that we were to allow that theme on this table, does that mean we're allowing that theme of submissions into our consideration and we're documenting that we've taken that theme of adverse effect of the environment into that process?
Absolutely, yes. You know, it's council's prerogative as the administering body to consider all the information we've provided here, and if you are of the mind to say, actually, we agree with that adverse effect on the environment, we're agreeing, we're allowing that theme as part of this process. Absolutely.
So in this instance, the reason it's disallowed is because it's met in a different theme regarding the reserve management plan. That's why this one's currently proposed as disallowed, is that correct?
Resource. No, would it not be the other way round? This is dealing with the Reserves Act, and the resource consent comes under the resource management consent process. And allowed or disallowed is looking to separate quite clearly between the decisions made under one set of legislation versus this set of legislation, which is the Reserves Act legislation.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. It's a complex matter, I think, because we are required to go through a process by the legislation, and that's what the staff are doing, and breaking it down this way and taking through each of the themes. But for example, if I raise under adverse effect on the environment, what was raised in the submissions are the possible smoke conversion layer and the smell of smoke and hence the pollution. Now, while they might agree with other elements being disallowed in that theme, further exploration of that issue may indicate that we're not agreeing with the disallowed aspect of that. So if I take that and just ask you about the smell of smoke, have you got any comments given the climate and weather events that are in town now and the consistent fog and inversion layer over a small period of the year?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is a classic example of part allowing, part disallowing. If you look at what we've said, the reasons for our suggestion of disallowing, when you look at the one in relation to non-compliance with Ivan Wilson Park, it talks about vegetation management. It says, will not result in the removal of any tree or plant or shrub. So what the application, it's looked at the relevant management policies in the reserve management plan, which talks about environmental effects, and has said in their application, will not result in the removal of any tree or plant or shrub, will not threaten or adversely affect indigenous fauna, will not preclude the introduction of trout, the water quality will not result in any discharge. So what we're saying in those 2 points there, if you've got to read those other points there, and that one relating to the reserve management plan, and look at the resource consent, which was an environmental consent, which was granted, albeit on conditions. We looked at that and so we felt that the theme of the effect on the environment, that theme should be disallowed. However, you're entitled to have different opinions, and you may say, based on the exact example you talk about, Madam Chair, the smoke and the smell of smoke and the aversion layer, that you might feel that they are relevant points that we actually are going to allow. So you may change that recommendation to part allow.
And have staff got any comments on relation to the smoke conversion layer, etc., in relation to, what was submitted as a concern?
We haven't expressly discussed that particular point, Madam Chair, but like anything, it is a possibility. And again, in many cases, what happens is result of the atmospheric events at any particular time. So on some day it may not be there, some day it may be. We don't know. So it's very subjective, and it's sometimes you don't really know until something actually is put in place.
So thank you. So it has the potential to occur, but
it has the potential.
Thank you. Mayor Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. I just want to double check the word environment in there is, like, when you look at water quality, that's kind of environmental, but I also see it as the experience in the atmosphere in the park for the users. So is that encapsulated in the word environment, or is it specifically the environment, if that makes sense?
Through you, Madam Chair. I would consider what the question you're asking there is with regards to amenity, and that's the character of the park, and the effects on the environment, or the actual effects on the land and the water and the air.
Because it's just, sorry.
No, carry on. I was just asking if it answered your question, but you've got a further comment.
Yeah, well, there's just an additional one that I picked up during the hearings and the submissions around the distance to the toilet. Like, we've got increased traffic and volume, but also the distance from where the proposed sauna is going to be to the actual toilet itself, and some risks and concerns around that. And I'm not sure whether that should be listed in that criteria as well.
Thank you. We've got footfall and pathways listed there, but you're identifying those in relation to the distance from the toilet.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Council is defined as the administering body of this reserve. Council has the ability to change the status of a reserve depending on the use of that reserve. Is that correct? That's the first question I've got.
Yes.
Okay, next question.
No, but there's a process, it's like everything, there's a process to follow, which in some cases doesn't need public consultation, other cases it does need public consultation.
Okay, so based on the possibility of making those changes, this is currently a district-funded reserve. Would council be open to the notion of divesting it into the Fiordland Community Board so then it becomes a community board-funded initiative?
I've just got a comment on that one. So council has the ability to, in the future, I would suggest, consider those sorts of issues. So anything like that is potentially on the table. It's not part of today's decision-making around the licence, if I may suggest.
Thank you.
But just and one further question on that particular, if that did happen, that would not change the position that the Southland District Council is the administering body. The Fiordland Community Board would not become the administering body. Council is the administering body of council reserves, not a community board, in terms of the Reserves Act.
Thank you. Okay, and then Councillor Byers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, look, I think we're working through this table, aren't we? So if we could go back to the adverse effect on the environment, and I think you're talking about the likelihood of something occurring. The water quality, with 160 people passing through there, I would have thought that there's the potential that there'll be an effect there. The smoke, heating saunas to accommodate 160 something people, I would have thought that on balance that there is going to be an effect of smoke in that park. I don't see how you can rule that out. And also the footpaths, the traffic as part of that adverse effect on the quality of the environment. 160 people a day, I would have thought that you would have to think that on balance there will be an adverse effect on the traffic levels in that park, and hence an effect on the users. So I think that adverse effect on the environment should be allowed.
We'll come back to that at the end in terms of councillors voting.
Oh, okay.
At this stage, we're just taking the comments and working our way through. Are there any other comments before we move to the next one? Councillor Wilson?
Moving on to the next one, sorry.
Oh, okay. All right, so we'll move on to water quality. So there, noted in the submissions, localised detrimental effect on aquatic life, the effect of runoff of building materials, the effect of accumulative effects of the body lotion, sweat, etc. Water baseline testing requested before proposing proceedings. This is a request. Possible localised eutrophication of water and cleaning water to be discharged into the lake is wrong. And the comments there, the issue was covered in the application stating there would be no discharge to the lake or land surrounding the lake. However, there are merits to these objections, and council is able to determine any additional terms and conditions to the proposed licence as it sees fit. Several submitters suggested water testing, including pre-activity baseline water testing and ongoing water testing, would be considered as part of the proposed licence terms and conditions. And noting that the application has also been granted a resource consent where actual and potential adverse environmental effects were considered in that process. Questions, comments? Councillor Byers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, again, if there's 160 people passing through and sauna activities, accommodating them, what's that on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? How many is that? Or over the course of a year? It's a small lake. I would have thought that on balance you would have to accept that there will be somehow some negative effect on that lake.
Comments? Okay, so we move on to next, commercialisation. Undesirable to have a commercial presence in the park. Proposed infrastructure would limit general recreation access to only those who can pay. Precedent setting, proliferation of allowing commercial activities in the recreation reserve. And the response to that, commercial applications for recreational activities in a recreation reserve can be applied for. Council then has a requirement to consider these applications and to work through the process, including public submissions if required. Commercial activities relating to recreation and recreation reserves occur throughout the country and are not new. For example, driving ranges, mini golf, luge roads, cafes, restaurants. Staff are unable to comment on whether or not other commercial applications for this park will be made in the future. If they are, they will be assessed at that time. And noting in there that the park is 34,397 hectares, whereas the proposed activity is 78 metres square, which equates to a negligible footprint on the park. Is the comment. Councillor Marai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I struggle here with I have read all of this, but the part sort of that's put in braces for perspective, the park is 34 hectares, whereas the proposed activity, that is looking at a very isolated bit. You're talking of the foot traffic, the parking, the people using toilets, plus this assumes that the entire reserve has the equal value, whereas this isn't. There is certain areas where people will cluster more. So I see the sense and everything else, but this particular bit that's in braces, sort of added as a mitigant, doesn't sound right to me. Quite the contrary.
Thank you. Councillor Dodson.
I'm just wondering how much parking is currently at the park?
Sorry, to be about a dozen.
I haven't counted the parks, but there was a traffic engineer's report attached to the resource consent. I can't recall specifically what the details of that were, but as the applicant has said in those other points, that anybody coming there as part of their booking will be directed to use the existing parking that is available.
And question? Yeah, and that's, well, I don't really have a question, more a statement is that if you've got, 6 people twice an hour, two saunas, there's potentially 12 extra vehicles in that car park every hour. And that does affect the users who want to go there for the secluded nature of the park.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Just regarding the commercialisation part, the understanding that recreation reserves have commercial, around the place have commercial ventures, and I think of like the ice skating rink up in Queenstown Gardens, and I'm pretty familiar with that, but traditionally would the reserve management plans have had that conversation with the community of whether commercialisation is appropriate in such a reserve? That, because I could even think of discussion come up around even like Waikaia and the future of some of the reserves. There's opportunities of can commercial ventures come in, and then where can some of the benefits of the commercial venture then start to fund the reserve itself? And it's often come back to, well, it needs to be in the reserve management plan. So I'm looking at this one a little bit back to front of, even going back to the environment one, well, that's addressed in the reserve management plan, but then in commercialisation, the reserve management plan would give effect for that reserve as appropriate for commercial lease to occupy. Like that conversation's already happened with the community, whereas this is happening at a resource consent moment. So I can't see how this theme could be disallowed, because the points that were made in the submissions and also talking to people of the community and even standing on Lake Henry ourselves, it's the perspective of the park being almost 35 hectares and this business is only here. Lake Henry is only this big. There's 3 public platforms, and 1 out of 3 of them would be commercialised. So that sentiment from the submissions, I think, really does need to stand. It's hold on, we've got 3 viewing platforms around a lake, and we're proposing that one of them becomes a commercial venture. So that theme of submission, I think, really needs to be allowed into consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
I may comment on that, Madam Chair. I think the point commercialisation is holistic across the whole park. What we're saying is the Act allows for commercial activities within recreation reserves. If you're saying we're not going to allow any commercialisation, you are then saying if someone come along and wanted to set up a cafe in the park, you're saying no. That's what the theme is about commercialisation. What it's saying is the Act says you can, but if it's not contemplated in the reserve management plan, you've got to go through a process. Now, that's not to say that the reserve management plan, when it's reviewed, may say there will be no commercial activities in this park. That's across the board. Not a floating sauna. It's no. What we're looking at is commercialisation in its wider sense. So what we're saying here is that it is allowed, and by saying we shouldn't commercialise the park, we're saying, well, because it is allowed, it should be disallowed. That theme of that particular submissions. However, if you do disallow it, then I think that potentially is a pretty good guide as to what needs to go in the reserve management plan, which says there will be no commercial activity in the park, full stop.
Thank you. I did neglect, I think, to read out the comments here for those who might be viewing from a distance the meeting today. So around commercialisation, it's undesirable to have, the comments are undesirable to have a commercial presence in the park. Proposed infrastructure would limit general recreation access to only those who contain the presidency and proliferation of allowing commercial activities in this recreation reserve was coming through from the submission. The comments here are commercial applications for recreational activities in a recreation reserve, which is what you're saying, Kevin. Council then has a requirement to consider these applications and to work through the process, including public submissions if required. Commercial activities relating to recreation and recreation reserves occur throughout the country and are not new. Those other examples given. And staff are unable to comment. Oh, I did read that one out, but I just repeated it. Yeah. So I'll come across to Councillor Rainey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to point out, so this is a comment as opposed to whether I'm saying allow or disallow. And it kind of relates to commercialisation, but also infrastructure. Just bear in mind that there is the mini disc, or there is the disc golf in the park already. So whilst that is not necessarily a paid activity, it is infrastructure that does enhance the park as an activity that has come in subsequently to the plan being developed.
Any other comments before we move on?
I'm just going through some of the comments I noted from the people who submitted in the hearings in April, and I think it's more not just commercialization. Multiple people said that the jetty is the first place we head to when we visit the park. It's not just commercialization, say something like the disc golf or maybe a cafe in a corner or something, but it's the point, that focal point for most people, that is where this commercialization is proposed. I think that was the sentiment there, plus the fact that it's used for night sky watching and those sort of things. That is what the majority of the submitters were objecting to, in my perspective. Had it been something a little out of the way, in a corner, somebody opening a pop-up cafe or something, I think we might have had a different sense, but that's just my view. That should be taken into concern. That it's a very focal point for most people, the lake, one of the jetties that's being proposed to be commercialized here. Thank you.
From memory on the submissions, I think the commercialisation was to the acknowledgement that Te Aneau's got a strong tourism economy, but the park was cited as a space where locals could step away from the commercial tourism and go to a local space that wasn't commercialised.
All right, I'll move on to the infrastructure burden. Increase infrastructure usage of toilet, footpaths, car parking, existing heating. The application states that each sauna can accommodate up to 6 guests per hourly session. Many submitters have commented on the potential burden of additional people on the current infrastructure of the park. It is not considered that these numbers will have any significant effect on the use of existing infrastructure. Not only were submitters concerned about perceived displacement of existing users to the current facilities, especially parking, but they're also concerned about the potential burden of cost to the ratepayer for any improvements. Maintenance on parks is typically budgeted as standard. The potential increase of visitor numbers should not significantly impact the budget. The number of customers allowed has been established by the conditions set out in the resource consent decision. The rental funds received from the resource will be allocated to Ivan Wilson Park and will then be available for use on the park. So far, the market rental, an annual contribution of 1,000 plus GST towards the maintenance of the toilet in the park, and a one-off contribution of up to 5,000 plus GST for any potential upgrades of signage has been agreed on. Any associated extra proposed infrastructure additions by the applicant in the future will be dealt with through the application to construct on council land process. Typically, council insists that the applicant pays for and maintains the structure. Yes. Councillor Byers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 61,320 people per annum is the allowed amount to potentially be going through that park into the sauna. So I find it difficult to understand how we could agree that there'll be a minimal impact on car parking or toilets or any other infrastructure in there, really.
Councillor Marai, did you have your hand up? Oh, sorry. Councillor.
Through you, Madam Chair, just around the one-off contribution of $5,000 plus GST for upgrades of signage. I'm just trying to wrap my memory here. Is that over and above what consultation with the local would be? Because I think I remember reading through the report that after that engagement, if we would like the applicant to provide some culturally significant or applicable signage, that would also be part of the application, but there wasn't actually, I don't think there was a dollar figure associated with that.
I'll be able to add to that, but within the resource consent process, there was an agreement that there would be further discussion on the signage to reach an agreement if it was appropriate. You want to add to that,
Yes, Madam Chair, I think, yes, there were definitely some signage requirements in terms of the resource consent. I don't think there was, this is also upgrading any other signage that might be in the park. I think it's a holistic thing about what came out of the resource consent, what's there now, what needs to be upgraded, and saying that upgrading is a consequence of this proposal. Therefore, the applicant has got to contribute, was it 5,000 was what the figure, to contribute towards that upgrading. Not, to be honest, not 100% sure what that upgrading is at this point, but there is a contribution towards that signage upgrade from the applicant.
So just to be clear in my mind, that contribution is for any improvement to signage for Ivan Wilson Park as a whole, not as applicable to the business.
Yes, and I mean, any upgrading would be as a consequence of if the licence is approved and it's there, then there will need to be some signage upgrades happening at the park, which has been as a consequence of the application, so they should pay. So I think whatever the details of what upgrading's needed, I don't think has been 100% defined. But there will need to be some, so this is saying you've got to pay $5,000 towards that cost.
Just around the, does that answer
your question? Thank you.
Just around the car parking, if the car park is full, then where are people likely to park? On the grass verges, sort of, or are they likely to go out to the side of the road, and does that leave, is that an issue in terms of parking?
I think, like anything, if the parks are full, yes, people have got to park on the street and have to walk up the hill. I don't think they're not allowed to park on the grass, but without sort of knowing exactly what's in that transport report, I just can't recall all that detail.
I was just trying to remember whether there's an impediment to others using the road if people are parking out on the road. Councillor Graney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually cannot remember how many parks that are there, but to try and answer that question, there, I believe, are at least 15. There probably is an ability to park a little bit on the side of the road and up into the park, but the additional parking space would be down on Steamers Beach, more likely than not.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
Thank you. One of the is correct, and it's being disallowed that the infrastructure burden is not considered that the numbers will have an existing effect on the infrastructure. I would almost debate it for the jetties because there's only 3 of them and it basically takes one out. Even though they say people will be allowed to go there, it changes, it has an impact on the environment of that jetty, and so I think it does, just putting, say, 61,000 people on, which is probably unlikely, but even if it's 50% of that, 30,000 people go onto that jetty, it still changes the usage quite substantially, and as a percentage of the fact that there's only 3 and one is being used that much. I think it is a burden on it. I think that it would be, whether it would need to be replaced any sooner or not would be another matter at all. But it takes it out of the general public use, I believe. Also, is there an ability, if we found that the car parking became inadequate, can you then go back and say, and I'm picking that we wouldn't be able to, go back and say you need to pay for more car parking to be provided because of their own use? I'm picking that we wouldn't be able to say to the users.
Yeah, I think it is something that we could discuss with the applicant in relation to the terms and conditions of the licence. And I think, though, it would have to be absolutely proven that the issue is a consequence of the floating sauna. I mean, I have been to the park, probably not as much as Councillor Graney, being a local, but I've been there numerous times when there's been no other vehicles there, and I've been there other times when there are 4 or 5 or 6 vehicles there. So, it's just depends. You know, sometimes there's weddings held at the park. Sometimes, as I say, there's disc golf. The car park could be full now for various reasons. So, it's absolutely something we can discuss with the applicant if that's what council wants us to do. And just not sure where the outcome of any ultimate liability would rest in regard to any upgrading, but it's definitely something to discuss.
Well, I'm just sort of thinking of it in terms of if it was any other commercial entity. being established, they would have to be providing their own toilets, close them up, these ones are, and also own car parking for the number, relative to the number of customers. So you're just thinking of it in terms of
Through your worship.
of the rate of how the rental has been calculated seems to me to be disproportionate to the amount of service that is being provided by the public. Park that is being used, which when I looked at it, that seemed to be the main consideration. It was actually the area that they were using, not all the other pieces that were taken into account when the calculation was done.
Through your worship, a general comment, and I think Kevin's got some more detail for you, but so there's been a resource consent process and some issues and environmental impacts have been considered, but you're now considering this as the landowner and the administering body. So if say you were of a mind that you may grant a licence, I'm not saying you will or you won't, but if there was issues around things like wanting to have some control over the risk of car parking use, it is possible for us to have a look at conditions around if the licence was granted, that we reserve the right to have further discussion and potentially require the licence holder to contribute to car parking upgrades. I just make that as a general comment.
If I may, Madam Chair, the report that was attached to the resource consent covered off parking, and I think this is actually quite important for this discussion. Ivan Wilson Recreation Reserves includes on-site parking for users of the leisure activities, including walking tracks, mountain bike tracks and frisbee golf. In total, there are 28 formed 90-degree angle car parking spaces. The car park area has been observed during the mid-afternoon period during the busy holiday season, January 2025, to get an understanding of the likely maximum usage. These observations suggest a peak parking demand during the busy holiday period for 8 car park spaces. This was recorded in the early afternoon during the weekend, Saturday at 2 p.m. These observations suggest a typical median parking demand for 5 car parking spaces. The 85th percentile demand is for 7 car parking spaces. These car parking observations suggest that there are typically 20 or more available car park spaces within the Ivan Wilson Recreation Reserve.
So, sorry, who was the writer of that report?
That was Bartlett Consulting, which provided that information to the applicant as part of their transport report that was attached to the resource consent. But just the question around the number of parks and the usage, that covered that off based on their observations at that time.
So it's not really an exact science of any, it's just one spot in time in a period of...
An indication.
Yeah, it's an indication, but it's not...
Okay, we will need to move on because we've got a number of comments in relation to...
Is that then appropriate that it is disallowed?
We will come back to voting on that. So that's your comment is in relation to our decision at the end of the process. Councillor Boland.
One quick comment. Oh, well, on that, the Southern Lights might be another good time to see what the parking is like up there. But the contribution $1,000 to the toilets, if the maximum number allowed visited there, it works out at about 1.5 cents per person.
Your Worship, just a comment on that, if I may. We don't have our parks staff here today to talk through the detail of that calculation, but equally, as I said, around car parking, that was a suggested figure that's been provided. Council may have a different view, that it could be more or less.
Yeah, I just have over the toilet one, I would have thought the toilet really should be part of the facility and not quite a distance away. And in the discussions that we had when we were up there, there was talk of shifting the toilet across to beyond the car park. So, you know, can that actually be built into the, if we agreed, can that be put into discussions with the person?
Oh, anything can be built into the discussions with the applicant, but it's like, anything, a relocated toilet with servicing with water and then the sort of discharge.
Yeah.
You know, it's quite a major issue when you're going from there down to a lower sort of level. It is definitely something to consider.
But if I was building a house on sections on Stewart Island that are below the sewage main, that I'm required to set up a system to pump the sewage to the main.
Yes.
So that would be no difference here if it was part of the project. It would be their responsibility to get the toilets.
And I think what you've raised is a future upgrade of the toilet that is there currently.
But I think the toilets...
The impact of that being further away.
But the toilets that are there now are not suitable for the solar.
Thank you.
I was just going to make a general comment through your worship that these are exactly the sort of issues that you're more than entitled to be concerned about and debate and consider and come into your decision.
Thank you. If we move then on to infrastructure creep, then we move the proposal may lead to infrastructure creep with new footpaths, bike parking, signage, etc. As above, all or any proposed structures to be built in support of the activity would be dealt with under the application to construct on council land process. Any further comment there? Yeah. If we then move on to perceived exclusion of the public, on which there are a number of submissions, perceived restricted public access to jetty, appropriating public space for exclusive use, open space comprised at the cost of the community, exclusivity, perception of a claimed space. Even if the jetty is not physically exclusive, the presence of activity would create a functional and psychological barrier. Displacement and constraint of existing users, including fishers, photographers, functions including weddings, etc. Class of use of existing users, safety issues of fishing and plunging activity. And then the comments, the element of perceived exclusion to the existing jetty. The existing jetty is not part of the proposed licence area. However, with a floating pontoon in front of the jetty, it will possibly have the appearance of being part of the sauna. The draft proposed licence to occupy document allows for the applicant to control the licensed area via their own rules and controls. The applicant has provided a verbal offer of access to the platform after hours. It is to be noted that this offer could change at any time and will be outside of council's control. An example could be that the applicant could revoke access permissions in response to adverse behaviours by the public. The potential perception of a claimed space and the displacement of the existing jetty users by the proposed activity is considered to be a valid point. It should be noted that the public access to the park is not supervised by this proposal. You have allowed this in terms of your recommendation. Any comments? Okay.
I think we shouldn't, as the staff have mentioned, we shouldn't lay much by the fact that there is a verbal agreement that they'll allow. They're completely within their rights, and you can just imagine some disgruntled person going and doing something to have the infrastructure. So,
yes,
very, very clear. It is not just perceived, it is actually going to be an exclusion there for the public from what they consider their public space.
Have the ability to decide. Okay, I will move on to non-compliance with Ivan Wilson Park Reserve Management Plan. Again, a number of submissions on this. The Reserve Management Plan provides clear guidelines on the personal character of the reserve. Proposal differs from the vision of the park. Fires prohibited is the strongest language used. There are no workarounds to this, just a certain application. Vegetation management, bog and natural state, fauna refuge and management structures, water quality were the themes coming through the submissions. And the current reserve management plan for Ivan Wilson Park has specific criteria that are listed. Their application for a licence to occupy provided an assessment of their application against the management objectives. These being vegetation management will not result in the removal of any tree, plant or shrub, or any existing indigenous vegetation will be retained in its natural state. Fauna management will not threaten or adversely affect indigenous fauna. Fishery management will not preclude the introduction of trout into Lake Henry. Water quality will not result in any discharge to the lake or to land surrounding the lake. Fires to be contained within specifically designed, fully enclosed fireboxes and all fluids we fit to spark arrested. Motor vehicles, where guests arrive by motor vehicle, they will be collected as part of the booking process to park within the existing car park and walk to the sauna. Liquor disposal will operate in zero-based spaces and does not include any retail component that would be signage. No signage is proposed as part of the development. Leases and temporary use, the proposed licence is in the public interest and is in general accordance with the reserved's purpose, objectives and policies. Buildings and structures will largely be constructed using materials and colours that are naturally recessive and in harmony with the environment. Development will enable the public to enjoy the reserve in a way that has not previously been possible. And just note that the reserve consent decision covered comments while I have a drink of water. Councillor Byers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want that vegetation management, the idea that there will not be any tree, plant, shrub threatened or adversely affected. I find it hard to believe, wasn't that structure being planned in?
I believe that's their proposal, but at this point we can only go on what they've said on their application. It's up to them to comply with that.
Well, I just find it hard to believe that you can get a crane in there with this structure, tiptoe, they don't hover, get across there and put this structure onto the water without damaging some of that the shrubs and trees. There's going to be some, I'm really sure there will be some damage occur. And of course, once it's occurred, it was too late. Oh, whoops, we made a mistake.
I'm not suggesting for one moment, Councillor, that potential is there, but what we're saying is the applicant says there will not be. So the onus is on the applicant to make sure that that does not happen, and we will be monitoring that.
Yeah, but on balance, do we accept that that's possible?
We understand there's been no response. Can I just ask people in terms of their comments, because this covers some of the matters we've covered before, can you just address the new matters arising under?
I just noticed, so on the table, we're looking at the how specifically some of the management policies of the reserve management plan have been addressed through the process, but the one that sticks out to me, it isn't actually listed in the table. It's number 3 of the management objectives in the Ivan Wilson Park. Number 3 simply just says to, as far as possible, maintain Lake Henry and surrounding bog in its natural state. And then all of the policies in regards to like vegetation management, fauna management, fishery management, they're all kind of the management policies that have come out of those management objectives. And that's across the whole park. But looking at the 4 management objectives of the Ivan Wilson Park management plan, this proposal meets 2 out of 4 of them and pretty much goes against the other 2 out of 4, regardless of what specific policies in regards to dealing with fires and vegetation and everything. Just this does promote and facilitate multiple use of the park based on identifiable recreation activities compatible with the character and sustainability of the resource. But it would go right against, as far as possible, maintaining Lake Henry and surrounding bog in its natural state. So I think that in the submissions was really, it was interesting through the submissions to see people pick out particular parts of the management objectives and point to those. But you could also just go to number 3 of the management objectives and say that the entire proposal doesn't meet that criteria just in itself. And I think that needs to be included into this table. There's management objective number 3 of the Ivan Wilson management plan.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. It's not included, so I guess we won't be able to include it now because we're considering the matter today. But do you have a comment?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a point that can be added to it. But in terms of that particular one, we have talked about that. The existing jetties are not the natural state. So there has been some element of modification already. And the second question just to pose is something floating on the water actually going to change the actual state, the natural state of the water or the bog? So I think in terms of, it's an absolutely 100% point to raise, Councillor, but I think we just, like anything, just got to put it in a context and specifics and ask yourself, there's already been an element of modification there already with the existing jetties, and also question whether something floating on the surface of Lake Henry is actually going to modify the natural state. So it's just, yeah.
So it's linear, and it comes back to then looking at that first and then understanding, which is why, in my mind, I'd allow for then the consideration of environmental impact, because it would be almost more imperative to get that consideration right, considering this management objective. So it's kind of just like a timeline thing of we have to consider that big overarching objective, which is why then the consideration of environmental impact and everything around that particular part of the reserve, not the whole reserve, but the lake itself, is so important.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And what you're suggesting would be added to the next phase of the process, and the report to the Minister, the table can be added to. Is that what
Absolutely, absolutely. As Megan has referred to previously, look, there's been lots and lots and lots of points and issues, and we're not going to say that maybe there is the odd one that has slipped through the net, and quite clearly that is one, and we acknowledge that and accept that.
Councillor Dobson.
Yeah, I've now shifted the page. It was talking about, there's a lot of pages in there. Will not result in any discharge to the lake or to land surrounding the lake, but yet, and now I'm just trying to find within the previous 500 pages, the piece that I was looking at earlier, in regards to them drawing water from the lake, and then any sauna would condensate and go back to the lake or be evaporated. Is that not contradictory to what is in there? Am I missing something here? Is there something else? I've just got to find the page. It was in there. I guess the proposal.
So what you're indicating is by taking water from the lake and then discharging it back into the lake in itself has an impact on the water. Is that what you're asking? That's why Councillor Dobson is looking for it. You might want to comment. Good day.
Taking water from the lake. Do you want to comment? He's asked if he's saying they're taking water for the lake. How can they say there's no discharge?
Yes. The proposal is that the applicant takes water from the lake and uses that water within the sauna, and is not going to be using any cleaning chemicals or additions of any kind, and then that water would be going back into the lake. That is the proposal. So I would assume that when they're saying there's no discharge, there's no additions to the water with regards to chemicals. That's how I interpreted it.
So it's looking at its narrow view of no additional chemicals, but what has been raised in the submissions is that people body lotions and
correct.
And that's right. I've spent a lot of time in saunas, and I can assure you that there is a lot of stuff that comes out of there that is not just the water that went into it. And I mean, in all seriousness, that is quite contradictory to what is said on page 289, I think, of their submission, 393 in our minutes. The water used for the floating sauna is sourced from the lake and either returns to the lake or is evaporated as part of the process. And that's completely contradictory to what's in
For
there.
your comment without going into additional detail. Are there further comments on that area, Councillor?
Just one, and this might have been a throwaway comment by some of the people who spoke that day, but at least 2 submitters mentioned this, that the fact remains that they were part of some local tree planting group or something, and they were told that currently, while the reserve management plan update process is happening, what their objection was that they were told to hold fire, yet this process of granting this particular application was still going ahead. Is there something to it that you could possibly add? Because if we are going to have to go back to individual people and respond to them.
I don't think we can, well, I can't comment on the ones because we've got no knowledge of that. Okay. But I think we've got to remember this process started prior to the reserve management plan review starting.
That's probably it. Thank you.
Thank you. In the interest of time and wanting to give full consideration to all these things, I'm just going to work through this, but just ask them if you've raised them commented on, please don't repeat them, but address it to the thing so that we can get to the end here in a timely way. So we move then on to protection of existing users and animals. Concern about the protection of the jetty for existing user rights, photography, night sky viewing, fishing, water activities, access. The effect on the wildlife, particularly the effect on localised eutrophication and bird strikes into windows. Comments the potential perception of a claimed space and the displacement of the existing jetty users by the proposed activity could be considered to be a valid point. However, it is to be noted that public access to the entire reserve is not jeopardised by this proposal and the other jetties are available for use. There is a potential for effect on the local wildlife, but the actual effect is unknown at this stage. So I've had discussion on the jetties, for example, so that's noted. Any additional comments?
Just one I'd make was talking about the Aurora, and that particular jetty I understand is identified as the best viewing space for it. So that's been excluded by saying it's not a claimed space, and you've got a high-rise building there, in effect, to the large platform of the jetty. It would only be the narrow portion down the middle of that where they've got the 2 saunas each side. So there's a restriction of viewable space from the prime space there is, and then their operating hours are till 9 p.m. So in the winter, unless they have a different time, the viewing time is excluded in that time as well.
Thank you, Councillor West. It's daylight hours,
yeah.
So they will be seasonal.
Oh, did they? I didn't pick that up. Sorry.
Any further comments?
Through you, Madam Chair, just around the point on eutrophication. My understanding is eutrophication is levels of nitrogen and phosphorus levels within the water.
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe it's enrichment of the water.
Nutrient enrichment.
I'm not a scientist, sorry.
So based on that, and I'm not trying to be funny here, but as Councillor Dobson said earlier, when you put the body through excessive amounts of heat and then cold, throughout that process you're having to drink a lot of water. And one of the issues that I'm considering is the distance between where the existing toilet facilities are, and factoring in all of those things, could pose a potential risk in terms of users maybe going to the toilet where they're not supposed to. All of those things become amplified. So in that eutrophication space, and I know this is more around existing users and animals, that is a concern of mine potentially that I think we need to.
Any other comments? All right, we'll move on to the reserve management plan review. The application should be halted until the reserve management plan process is complete. Once the reserve management plan or the reserve management plan is updated and does not anticipate modern commercial operations. Council comment. Council is currently undertaking a review of the reserve management plans. At this point, it's proposed that this process will be completed by late 2026 or early 2027. The existing reserve management plan is a document that is relevant to this current process. Therefore, this is what is applicable for the applicant to consider. Councillor Dobson.
In regards to the Reserve Management Act, the Reserve Management Plan rather, and the process we're going through at the moment, what do we know about the proposed changes in the Conservation Amendment Bill, and will that affect Winton Park? My understanding it does. I'm not sure.
Well, a bill is a bill, it's not an act. And I haven't been aware of whether that has any effect on reserves. Honestly, haven't looked at it, Councillor.
It's probably not something we can consider in terms of
I'm just
and submission. So we'll, Thank you. That's awesome.
On this particular point, this is where I get a bit stuck on the whole thing, raising the submissions about the contradiction with the plan, that we're then updating the plans, which are over 20 years out of date, although Ivan Wilson got done in 2008. But to me, this reserve management plan under the Reserve Management Act is where the community gets its opportunity to have the discussion of what do you want to see in your local parks and reserves, what future planning, all of these things like commercialisation and opportunity. It starts at the plan space, and where I get a little bit concerned here is we've got plans that are out of date up for review. We can't have those discussions with the community on what's acceptable in the future of these reserves case by case with every resource consent. So it does highlight why this review needs to be done. But on the flip side, if a review and if a management plan can be, if we can go against the objectives of a management plan, it would then call into question whether we should bother updating them and spending the money to do the reserve management plans if our precedent is allowing an RMA process to also go against objectives of an operative plan. So that's where this consideration really does, to me, need to be allowed in the considering of these submissions, because it's a really good point raised by the submitters of we thought we had the protection of a plan that clearly states what's acceptable in Ivan Wilson, and if that goes against that, and we know that that's up for review, well, that's the place to have that conversation, not centred around this potential resource consent. I'd encourage, I think that's where I got through looking at this information and looking at the options going forward, and that's where it started to lay to me that deferring this until the reserve management plan does seem like the right thing to do, because it allows that conversation to take place in the right form or under the Reserves Act, rather than having that conversation now around a private resource consent application.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Mayor Scott.
I think Matt's just pretty much said everything that I was going to say, but I think we run a risk here with that being a conflict. If we were running the number of submitters that were speaking out in relation to the sauna, if that was a reserve management plan process, and I know we talked about actually incorporating that feedback in the reserve management plan process, there's definitely a clash in there, and I think that would be problematic. So yeah, just I guess I'll in the interest of your time, I'll disagree with what Matt was saying and support it.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments?
Can I comment on that one, Madam Chair? The reserve management plans are a point in time, and whatever's in the reserve management plan, people can apply like they've done now, and they've made application and considered their application against what they believe is in. It's actually in compliance with the reserve management plan as it exists today. It's your role here as the administering body, as we've talked about, to decide whether you believe the application is in line with or outside the objectives of the reserve management plan. By simply saying we're not going to receive anything until we review a reserve management plan, is basically saying anything in the future will not happen until we've reviewed the reserve management plan. So in effect, your decision today, or your consideration of these particular points, is a position as to whether you agree or disagree with the application, how it applies to the reserve management plan today as it exists today. And it's judged against what's in that reserve management plan today. I personally think it's a wee bit unfair for an applicant to then say, well, no, you've now got to wait for another particular period to assess it against a new plan, when in fact the process today is for you to assess it against the current plan. You could say, we believe it's in accordance with the management policies of the reserve management plan, or you could say, no, we don't agree, it's in accordance with the policies of the reserve management plan, and make your decisions accordingly.
Thank you, Kevin. I note one of the options, option 3, is to defer a decision on this application until the reserve management plan review is completed. So comment was made in relation to that. Any further comments on that section? Okay, so we move to non-compliance with the Reserves Act. The sections quoted by submissions and paraphrase is section 17. The main person of recreation reserves is a provision of areas for recreation and sporting activities. This is to provide for the physical welfare and enjoyment of the public and for protection of the natural environment and beauty. Section 41, Council shall comply with the Reserve Management Plan and any amendments. And Section 44 grants authority to Council to lease areas within the recreation reserves for activities that align with the reserve's purpose. It enables the development of infrastructure such as sports facilities, kiosks and building structures, provided these enhance public enjoyment. And the comment, the Act allows for licensed occupier to be applied for and issued subject to specific processes being complied with. Again, comments please just in relation to new matters.
Well, sorry, thanks, Madam Chair. Well, provided these enhance public enjoyment, it seems like it's going against public enjoyment in this case.
Okay, we'll move on then to the next, excessive length of term. And the comment, maximum allowable term cannot exceed 33 years. There is some merit in these objections. Council can alter the term if it chooses. A trial period was suggested by some submitters, and that's allowed. So staff recommendation. We'll move on then to the scale of the activity. The comments, potential numbers of customers per day and their impact on current infrastructure concerns, size and shape of the proposed buildings and its visual imposition. Buildings would be a dominant element, would introduce an incongruous element to the park. Comments are the application states each sauna can accommodate up to 6 guests per hourly session. The renders supplied by the applicant show the height and area that will be utilised. As mentioned previously, the scale of the activity in comparison to the size of the lake and park is very small. The resource consent condition that a maximum of 12 customers shall be present within the sauna facility at any one time, and that's allowed. Right, we'll move on to the next. Market rental too low. Unacceptable low rental rate, a bond is suggested. The comments, the licence fee was determined by a market rental assessment by a registered valuer. There is an opportunity to adjust the proposed licence fee as this is at the Council's discretion. However, Council's standard practice is to follow a valuer's professional assessment. Council is able to suggest a new licence fee and the applicant can decide to accept the proposal or not. Any comments, Councillor?
I feel if you have the discretion in this case and seeing what the public sentiment is, we should be exercising that discretion.
Just confusion of why I might still be misunderstanding this allowed disallowed thing, but I'm trying to understand why this one's classed as disallowed.
Because it's standard practice?
Disallowed, but we do have the ability to suggest a new licence fee. So we could allow that commentary and do something around it.
So me too, Kevin too.
Yeah, well, the disallowed there is, so people are saying it's an unacceptably low rental, but we're saying the rental that was determined considered a whole lot of existing rentals and comparables. So if people are saying it's a low rental, what's it based on? What? So we're saying we've used the valuer's professional advice and looking at a whole lot of other examples right around Otago and Southland and across the country, actually, I think, from memory. But what we are saying here is that there is the opportunity for that to be reviewed by council as part of the process. And if that's what council wishes us to do, then that's definitely on the table, because at the end of the day, council can say, well, this is the rental. But one of the key things about rentals is it's got to be based on something so that when you come to do a review, you can do a comparison. It's not just a number picked out of the air at this point and say, oh, they've got to pay us $10,000. Well, what's that based on? Oh, it's just a number. That's what we've got to keep away from. We've used evaluation. If there is some amendment to that, then again, the reason and rationale for that final figure has got to be able to be used when doing a rent review, so you get a comparable.
This is one of those parts of the wider conversation of commercial lease to occupy within reserves, because there's the economic question around at what point is the economic benefit to the reserve of the lease in funding the maintenance and upkeep of the reserve and taking the rate burden off the ratepayer. So that's where this part is an interesting part of the equation on steps forward, because it's the community sentiment is still, it's not a good enough rental to forego giving up a piece of public space. So that's where that market rental, it might be well informed, it doesn't necessarily, it meets the public opinion of what's acceptable. So again, something we should consider allowing in our considerations.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'm going to need to ask you to keep your comments very brief, new members, because we have some time pressures here to consider members fully. Any other matters in relation to the last theme? Okay, so if we move to customer behaviours, and I suggest we've covered a number of these. Health and safety of customers, provisions of safety equipment, toileting in and around the lake, clothing options of customers. So behaviours of customers is outside the council's control. It will be up to the licensee to manage. The proposed licence to occupy allows for council as a licensor to ensure licence compliance, which, if not adhered to, allows for termination and re-entry if necessary. Monitoring of the resource consent conditions is the responsibility of the council's compliance team. Safety of clients will have to be managed by the licensee, including considerations of any after-hours access by public. The draft licence to occupy requires the applicant to comply with all statutes and regulations, which would include health and safety obligations. The nearest toilet is approximately 220 metres away. A licensee provided toilet portaloo has been suggested in the submission. Any further comments? Okay. We go on to lack of enforcement of conditions. Some submitters mentioned the lack of council following up on other consents or enforcing of conditions. The proposed licence to occupy allows for council as a licensor to ensure licence compliance, which if not been adhered to allows for termination and re-entry. Monitoring of the resource consent conditions, the compliance team. Any other complaints relating to the licence would be acting upon as per council's legal abilities and discretion. Any comments? Okay.
Oh, sorry. Madam Chair, sorry, it's just the back one, the customer behaviour one. I think we're seeing there where the potential is for that jetty to be closed off. safety of clients have to be managed by the licensee, including considerations of any after-hours access by the public.
It's not noted earlier.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Inconsistency of council decision-making. Previous community groups have had modest permissions declined within the reserve, installation of small sheds planting due to inconsistencies with the park purpose or awaiting the outcome of the RMP review, the Reserve Management Plan review. A feeling that commercial investment has been prioritised over community-led objectives, and the common staff are unable to comment on previous applications or reasonings for non-approvals. All installations on council land are at the discretion of council and are assessed on a case-by-case basis. Comments? Okay, so we'll go to criticism of process of licence to occupy procedure, criticism of council process, criticism of lack of information. A comment, the required legal procedures for processing a licence to occupy under the Reserve, the Reserves Act 1977 have been complied with and exceeded. Requests, suggestions to the public notification process were received by some submitters and these were acted upon. Despite adherence to the legal process, staff welcome the additional constructive suggestions that have been provided with the view of continuous improvement. Any further comment? Okay. Moving on to location of business. Location of the floating sauna is inappropriate. Great business idea, but wrong location. Suggestions made for applicant to build their own jetty. The proposed floating structures will be visible from all other jetties. Overall, the majority of submitters, this is a comment from council, the majority of submitters were in agreement that the business idea is a good one, but the location is not appropriate. The location has been processed on the basis of the application. Any adjustments to the proposed location, again, is likely to attract varying opinions on a new location.
Yeah, so why is that not allowed then? So the staff kind of agrees with the idea that the location's perhaps not right.
In the context of this one, we're saying if there's going to be a proposed new location, then the whole process needs to start again. We're saying we're disallowing this because we're dealing with this particular application in this particular location. You can't just say, well, we'll give you a license, but you've got to go over there. You know, it's either we're going to accept what's been applied for or decline what's been applied for, and then it's up to the applicant to then say, well, I want to reapply again for a different location, which would have to go through that process. So we're saying we're disallowing that we move it to another location in terms of the context of this application.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan.
Based on what you've just said, Kevin, I know right at the beginning we said if this was to be opposed, then the licence to occupy basically ceases. But does the applicant have the right to appeal the decision? And if that is the case, would it be prudent for the council, based on these questions around saying, well, maybe there's a different location you could look at, would it be prudent for the council to front foot that and say, look, in the event that this doesn't go through, here are some other options so that you don't actually have to go back and start this long, arduous, financially pretty full-on process for the applicant.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. I don't know whether you can answer.
I think it's sort of heading into that suggestion, Councillor, is potentially heading into a predetermination question.
It's outside of our...
They're saying, oh yeah, we're all good, but you've got to go over there. And what we're saying is some other people may have disagree with that particular location. So it potentially opens a can of worms. I think it's either we say yes or no to the application.
Can I reword the question then? We have existing commercial entities that are operating on Lake Taiano at the moment. Is council in a position to be able to say, well, look, you know, we've looked at the application, council have made a decision, can we suggest other options? in
I
that
think
space.
Councillor O'Brien, we're focusing on the submissions today. There will be further information for the applicant depending on what the decision is today. So
Okay, can I just go back to, can the applicant appeal the decision?
I haven't seen anything in, that is a legal question. I haven't seen anything in the Reserves Act that says there is an appeal process. However, that's not to say there may be some grounds under some other form of legislation. I do not know.
So we'll leave that to come back. Thank you. Any other comments on location of business? Adverse impact on night sky viewing photography. The comments and submissions is aimed at views perfect for aurora viewing. Imposing buildings would impede these viewing. Potential light pollution. The staff comments, the proposed was for operation during daylight hours only. The height of the proposed buildings will probably affect the sight lines of the night sky to the south. Applicant has verbally offered use of the floating platform after hours. However, this is subject to change. Then there are other jetties available. There are other jetties available for use. This is allowed. Any further comments? Construction activities and adverse impacts. The presence of construction activities being disrupted to the park. This submission has merit that should be considered. Details on how the floating pontoon and sauna buildings will be constructed and brought into the site have not been finalised with council, as we discussed before, hence the council comment. Given the current access way to the existing jetty, it's difficult to envision how the construction will occur without any damage to the park. Staff recommend an additional condition that any damage occurred as a result of the construction phase shall be made good by the applicant. So I would suggest we've already covered this. Yep. Right, move on. Fiordland Community Board letter of support. Fiordland Community Board expectations. The proposed floating pontoon is not out of light of sight of the main jetty. No one-off contribution to a toilet upgrade indicated. Staff comments. The wording on this letter states there are some conditions that they would like considered if consent has been granted. Staff agree that proposed platform may not be out of line of sight of the main jetty. However, this location was approved in the granted resource consent. Instead of a one-off contribution to the toilet, an annual contribution was decided upon in consultation with the applicant. All other considerations requested by the board in this letter have been accounted for in the proposed licence to occupy. I would just note that the Mayor received an email on the 2nd of April from the Community Board, just outlining after recent discussions at that time amongst board members, they wanted to note that they had some concerns as a result of more information that has come available through the public submission process, and would like councillors to be aware of their present views in order to be able to consider all information before us. And that letter was passed on to councillors last night. It hasn't been contained in this report because staff were unaware of this information, but because it's received prior to these submissions on the 8th of April, then we can pass that on to you. And they've noted of particular concern is the lease length. 30 years seems like an excessive length for a commercial lease. Low income value of the lease for a commercial venture, small financial contributions towards park and toilet maintenance, visual impact of the main viewing platform at the lake. And the board's original letter of support was provided on the basis of a high-level concept with the understanding that the detailed arrangements, including lease terms, visibility and alignment with the park's purpose, would be developed collaboratively and remain consistent with community expectations. And noting that staff did present a report to the board in December 24 seeking continuing support for the licence to occupy. While that report informed the board of the process for granting a licence to occupy and explained the statutory parameters governing the lease duration, it did not include detail about the specific terms that would ultimately appear in the lease itself. And the staff subsequently prepared the lease, and that was made available to the public. Just note that the board is not rescinding the earlier letter of support, as they still believe in enabling and supporting new ventures that align with community goals and the Community Futures Plan. However, it is clear that the proposal in its current form does not meet the expectations implied in their original letter. So I have summarised part of that, but that's for the information, and just make the applicant aware that also that letter has come in. Thank you.
No, I don't, thank you.
When staff are preparing this, they weren't aware of that letter, and obviously it's expanded on that report. Anything else you want to add? And noted that is allowed. Suggested terms and conditions. Operator provides their own duty. Operator provides their own toilet and portaloo. Operator funds additional car parking. Monitoring and review conditions should amenity values be proven to be adversely affected with raised in submissions. Council comment. Council is able to specify any terms and conditions that it decides are appropriate for this proposed licence to occupy. The applicant is then able to agree to these proposals or not, and that's allowed. Any further comment? Okay. Other emergency services access and cultural and historic information has been raised. Nothing will change the accessibility of emergency services as it stands now. Submitters supplied interesting background and descriptions of the park. That's partially disallowed, partially allowed. Okay, so we move into the themes and support. The positive amenity effects. Enhance amenity experience, adds to the character of the park, makes use of underutilised park. The comment, the land status is a recreation reserve. This activity is complementary to recreational activities. Comments? Activity provision, another activity for tourists and locals to do, low impact nature-based tourism, fits in with Fiordland's tourism character. It's been noted in the submissions. And comments, this would be another activity for both locals and tourists to do. Okay. Existing users are not excluded. Submission comments, there is room for everybody. It does not stop other users from undertaking recreational activities on the park. And staff comments, the park is very large and can sustain the proposed activity alongside existing recreational activities. That we haven't made before.
Just 1/3 of the usable area, which we did cover.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, if working through the allowed channel, I think that comment there, just backing what Michael said, would actually put that into the disallowed sentiment.
Because each of the three themes I've read out have all been allowed. So finally, in terms of the themes, economic opportunities, submitters noted positive effect on other businesses, potential lengthening of tourist time in the region and repeat visits may occur, supporting and contributing to healthy ecosystem, and investment business in the region should be encouraged and adds to regional appeal. And that's allowed. All right, so thank you for your attention and your delayed lunch. And we can carry on to consider the resolution, please. Can we do that, or have we missed anything in that discussion that people wanted to raise before we move to the resolution?
Sorry, were we not going to go through and talk about whether some of those are disallowed we're going to be?
Yes, so we can do the under E, I would think, unless you have otherwise. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Okay, so you're right with that. So the do we just D first?
You can move and second for everything, and then A to D, and then come to E, take it separately, and then do G.
Right. I can retain that all in my memory bank. So mover and seconder for all A to G, please. Thank you, Councillor Spraggan. Have we got a seconder? Councillor Dobson. All those.
And you want, are you only putting A to D at the moment?
Right, okay.
A to G.
So we've
So
got
I
a
move
mover
on
second.
then?
Hang on.
G. A to G for the whole, and then you're just going to vote on A to D at the moment, and you can take E separately and get that one out.
Thank you. So we've got a mover overall, and now we need to.
So you're going to put A to D?
Yes. So I now ask for a mover for.
No.
Sorry, I just put A to D.
Yep.
Okay. So in relation to A to D, all those in favour, please say yes.
Yes.
Contrary? No? Carried. Okay, and now we move to E, and that's about considering and deliberates on each theme recommendation, which we have had full discussion of. So if you've got table 24 before you, so adverse effect on amenity, and that's allowed, and so I will ask for.
Just go through and get everyone's agreement on that.
Yes, but in terms of I ask people to vote on that, is that the...
Get a consensus, and then we can come back to E and go.
Right. Can I have an indication whether there is agreement to allow adverse effect on amenity? So please raise your hands if this. Anybody disagree? Adverse effect on the environment, which staff recommendation is to disallow. Can you raise your hands if you please, if you agree with the disallowed recommendation? So if you agree with the disallowed recommendation.
Disallowing the consideration of those submissions, raising those points. Is that?
Yes, because it's already as a part of the resource management and the reserves.
So either we're asking if you agree with the recommendations. Can you please raise your hand? Can you please raise your hand if you disagree with the recommendation? So I got from that no one was agreeing to the disallowed option, and the majority, I think, of you were agreeing with that it be allowed. Did anybody not wish? Did anybody not vote on that?
I'd like to abstain from voting because I'm actually quite confused in this space right now.
How can we clarify that for you?
It sounds like we're allowing adverse effects on the environment when what we're allowing is the submissions raising the adverse effects on the environment. We're allowing those submissions.
We're considering those particular things.
Can I just come to
right.
clarification?
First things first, as we said previously, apart from the late submissions, every submission has been accepted for consideration.
Yes.
All right. What we have then done is summarised them into themes, and we're saying to you whether you allow, and they're not words that we would prefer to use, but that's what the Act says we got to consider. So what we're saying is we, and council sort of, when I say we, sorry, council in deciding whether they allow or disagree or disallow, you're allowing the theme that there will be an adverse effect on the amenity. If you are the next one, you are saying...
Let's deal with that one in terms of the process. So the opposite of to disallow is to allow. So by not agreeing to the staff recommendation of disallow, we're actually agreeing to allow
that particular.
Or you may, if council so decides, it may take the position that it partly allows. It's an option. It's an option.
But I get the sense that all were agreeing apart from Councillor Bryan, who wants to unless he's clearer about that now.
Well, I don't know. Like, as you say, like it might be a statutory requirement in terms of the wording, but I don't feel particularly comfortable that this council as a whole actually understands what it's voting on. And as you say, like an adverse effect on amenity for me would be do you understand or you do not understand that there is an adverse effect on them?
Consideration.
Everybody elaborating around the table, we need to go back to Kevin for a clearer explanation.
You're allowing the theme of the submission, or disallowing the theme of the submission. What we've said is we didn't get down to the details of each individual detail of each submission. So by saying you are allowing the theme that there's adverse effects on the environment, you are saying we actually agree there's actually adverse effects. By saying we disallow that theme, we're saying you don't agree that that's the best I can try and explain the.
Understand.
Just bear in mind that we actually come to the decision in terms of F about whether to approve or granting of the license. All right, do you still wish to abstain?
No, I'm fine now.
Okay, so we have agreement around to allow. The water quality. So if you agree with the staff recommendation to disallow, please raise your hands. Okay. If your decision is to allow the submission summary around the water quality, please raise your hand. Is there anybody that wishes to abstain? Sarah, you're not voting anyway, I think. Yes. Water quality. Yes. So commercialisation, the staff recommendation is to disallow. Please raise your hands if you agree. Councillor Priest. Can you please raise your hands if you disagree? Thank you. And anybody who hasn't voted wish to abstain? Abstain or?
No, I'll abstain.
Because it's here where you're looking at the abstention and stuff, you're just getting consensus at the moment.
So we have consensus because the majority. Yeah. Okay, that will make it more straightforward. Infrastructure burden. Again, please raise your hands if you agree with the recommendation to disallow. Please raise your hands if you disagree with it. Again, we have consensus to allow. Infrastructure creep, please raise your hands if you agree with the staff recommendations to allow. To disallow. Okay, please raise your, was that your?
No, carry on.
Please raise your hands if you wish to allow. Again, we have consensus. Perceived exclusion of the public, which is allowed. Please raise your hands if you agree with the recommendation. Yes. Is there anybody who disagrees? Okay. Non-compliance with Ivan Wilson Park Reserve Management Plan. The staff recommendation is to disallow. Please raise your hands if you agree with that. Okay, please raise your hands if you disagree with that. So that's to allow. Protection of existing users, people and animals. Please raise your hand if you agree with the staff recommendation to disallow. Okay, please raise your hands if you disagree with the council consensus there. Ivan Wilson Park Reserve Management Plan Review. Staff recommendation is to disallow. Please raise your hands if you agree with the disallow. Okay, please raise your hands if you disagree with disallow. Okay, again, we have consensus. Non-compliance with non-compliance with the Reserves Act 1977. Staff recommendation is to disallow. Please raise your hands if you agree. Okay, please raise your hands if you wish to allow that. Okay, consensus. Excessive length of term. The recommendation is to allow this. Please raise your hands if you agree with. Please raise your hands if you disagree. We have consensus there. The scale of activity, the staff recommendation is to allow. Please raise your hands if you agree. Okay. Please raise your hands if you disagree. Consensus. Market rental is too low. The staff recommendation is to disallow. Please raise your hands if you agree. Okay.
Yeah, just one.
Okay. Yep. Councillor Bryan. So please raise your hands if you wish to allow that submission. Again, we have not consensus, but the majority there.
Partly allow for me on that.
Partly allow? Do you want to elaborate?
No, just.
Okay. We have consensus overall. Customer behaviours. Please raise your hand if you agree with the recommendation. Disallow.
Disallow.
Yeah.
Partly allow on this one as well.
All right, so please raise your hands if you agree with the recommendation to disallow. 1, 2, 3, 4. So roll, please. Please, Scott. Please raise your hands if you disagree. 1, 2. So we have consensus on to agreement that it be disallowed. Sorry, it's starting to affect my retirement. Lack of enforcement of conditions. The staff recommendation is to disallow. Please raise your hands if you agree. Thank you. Please raise your hands if you disagree with that recommendation. So that's agreement disallowed. Inconsistency of council decision making. Please raise your hands if you agree with the council recommendation to disallow. Thank you. Please raise your hands if you disagree. Criticism of process of the licensed occupier procedure. Staff recommendation is to disallow. Please raise your hands if you agree with that recommendation. Okay. Please raise your hands if you disagree with that recommendation. Okay, so that's agreed. Location of business. The staff recommendation is to disallow. Please raise your hands if you agree with that recommendation to disallow. Can you please raise your hands if you disagree and wish to allow the submission? We're not getting everybody raising their hands by the way. You're abstaining. If I go through that again, please raise your hands if you agree with the recommendation to disallow.
This is for location of business.
Location of business. Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Agreeing with the recommendation. Can you please raise your hands if you don't agree and wish to allow? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, there we go, Christine.
Can you what?
Vote for that one.
Okay.
Just
so 5. So I'll go with that. Yeah.
Also, Rob, count Rob's vote.
Yes. Yeah.
5-4.
Would you allow or disallow that?
Okay, I'd like to allow. Sorry, I was with the later one.
Allowing the locations.
Reconsider. Adverse impact on night sky viewing photography. That's allowed. Please raise your hands if you agree with that recommendation. Please raise your hands if you disagree. It's allowed. Construction activities and adverse impacts. Please raise your hand if you agree with the allowed recommendation. Thank you. Please raise your hands if you disagree. That's fine, it's allowed. Fiordland Community Board letter of support. Recommendation is allowed. Please raise your hands if you agree with that being allowed. Thank you. Please raise your hands if you disagree with that recommendation. fine, that's allowed. Suggested terms and conditions, please raise your hand if you agree with the council recommendations to allow. Thank you. Please raise your hands if you disagree. So that's allowed. Other, that was the emergency access. Please raise your hand if you agree with the council recommendation to disallow. That's for the other. That's under the, I haven't got it in front of me now, but the emergency
Get to it.
access.
620.
Please raise your hands if you agree with the council recommendation to disallow. Yes. Okay. We're near lunch. Please raise your hands if you disagree with the allowed recommendation. So that's to disallow. Claims and submissions and support, positive amenity effects. Please raise your hands if you agree with the recommendation to allow. Please raise your hands if you disagree with the recommendation to. But we have consensus on that to allow activity provision. So council recommendation is to allow. Please raise your hands if you agree with to allow the submissions. Yeah. Those who disagree with the council recommendation, one. Yes, so we have majority agreeing. Existing users are not excluded. Please raise your hands if you agree with the council recommendation to allow. Okay, so please raise your hands if you disagree with the recommendation to allow. Again, we have agreement to disallow.
Allowing those submissions.
Oh, sorry, we've got some.
Just needed to clarify that with these ones in support, that we are simply agreeing with that those submissions be considered.
And economic opportunities, the last one. So the staff recommendation is to allow. Please raise your hands if you agree. Please raise your hands if you disagree. Majority saying allow.
So the emergency expenses, disallowed, so we voted to continue.
Yes, yes. So it's the emergency
historic information.
Oh, sorry, there was a disallowed and allowed on your themes. What is outlined in 24 is that it be disallowed.
Apologies for the oversight.
So what is correct is on this table that it be disallowed.
Because the other submissions were mainly around the historical nature and storytelling of the park, which was more informative.
You all right with that? Okay, then that takes us back to E, that we have considered and deliberated on the planning recommendation as set out in 24 and agreed to I'll agree or amend it as appropriate. Do we deal with that now?
Yep. And considers and deliberates on each theme recommendation is set out in section 24 and agrees as follows, and I'll put the table in with the allowed and disallowed.
We've gone through the process, that's all required, and then we move on to F.
I'll just point out that the way that resolution is written, it's one or the other. If the decision to take one of the other options is listed, then
so.
But anyway, just before, just in case you rush to put it.
Well, we have considered and deliberated on each theme recommendation as set out in 24, and we have agreed or amended as appropriate, haven't we?
Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm talking about F.
Oh, F.
I thought I had removed.
Oh, sorry, he's just about to go to F.
Do you want to put that?
Yes.
All those in favour?
All those in favour
of E?
Of E only. To the contrary? That's carried. So we move on to F. So decides as the administering body pursuant to the Reserves Act 1977 to approve or decline the issuing of a licence to occupy the Floating Sauna Limited for a floating sauna on Lake Henry in Ivan Wilson Park, Te Anau. So can you please raise your hands to...
Madam Chair, there are 5 options in this report.
Oh, yes, sorry, I'd forgotten.
No, well, it's just the way the resolution is written, which is, I think, what Kelly is saying. So you might want to consider 5, choose which option you're choosing, and then this resolution might need to be amended to give effect.
So as I understand it, we've got that resolution, but there's an opportunity if we, before we vote, to consider that could be changed to one of the options that are noted on page 34, 35.
34 and 35.
Yes. So do we consider...
Option 1 is to approve and grant a lease to occupy. Option 2 is to defer the decision subject to additional terms and conditions to be negotiated with the applicant. Option 3, defer a decision on the application until the reserve management plan review is completed for Ivan Wilson Park. Option 4, lay the report on the table should further information be required. Option 5, decline the application for the granting of a lease to occupy.
So if I open discussion on consideration of each of those options.
Okay. So you need to approve or decline.
So we'll just
pick an option.
Any comments on each of those options? Yes, Councillor Wilson.
Just regarding option 2, just trying to get an understanding from with those submissions and things that we've chosen to allow and not disallow, it doesn't then mean it's council's space to address those considerations within the application process. So as far as additional terms and conditions negotiated with the applicant, that would be on the onus of the applicant to look at the process, look at what the submissions, what came in, what led to decision making, if it was to be either a deferred decision or a declined decision or an approved decision. If it was not approved, is it appropriate to defer it and negotiate the terms and conditions from our side with those submissions, or is it up to the applicant to then essentially reapply or come back in the application process? Because if the difference between option 5 of declining the application and option 2 is essentially the same thing, except it's up to in option 5, it's up to the applicant to then come back to council. Option 2, it would be more a direction of agreed working forward together to get to a negotiated point. Does that
do you wish to comment?
Make sense?
I think option 2 in deferring the decision to discuss additional terms and conditions is a process to allow some of the issues that have been raised through the process in relation to the terms and conditions to be further discussed with the applicant, and then a subsequent report come back to council on that, and then you make the decision whether you wish to grant the licence or you don't wish to grant the licence, or if you decide today you're not prepared to grant the licence, then as Megan said, everything comes to a stop now. It's the option 2, deferring, allows discussion on a lot of those issues. Will come back as the result of those discussions, and then council will then, I anticipate at that stage, then be having the same discussion you're having now based on that additional information. What is our position?
Madam Chair, if I could, and I might end up being corrected, but in this process, you've resolved to consider some of the submissions that have been made, which actually relate to the resource consent, which has been granted. So if you go towards option 2, the conditions of the resource consent aren't subject to negotiation. It's the conditions with respect to the lease in the reserve management plan. So you've raised a very good point, Councillor, but we'd need to recognise that that's not the full range of issues that have been raised today, given that a number of them are very specifically dealt with under the resource consent, which is not subject to renegotiation.
So at this stage, we have an F decision to either approve or decline. When we're looking at the options, that has added 3 other options to consider, and if we go with one of these, that would be replacing F, as I understand it. So we're either, instead of agreeing or declining, we're actually saying, for example, a further decision subject to additional terms and conditions to be negotiated with the applicant, or deferring a decision on the application until reserve management plan review is completed for Ivan Wilson Park, or to lay the report on the table should further information be required. We're having discussion on any questions in relation to those additional 3, and if we go with one of those, well, if people wanted to change that, it'd be an amendment to resolution F. Will it? Yes, I'm getting. Are there any other questions in relation to those options which you wish to discuss before we put the motion?
Yes, clarify, was the term as part of the conditions of the resource consent?
Sorry?
Was the term?
No.
It wasn't, no.
It's part of this.
It's a licence to occupy. We're discussing
that. That's part of what we do.
Any other questions? Okay, so if I come back to just the process of the resolution in F.
Excuse me.
Mayor Scott?
Sorry, I can probably let you finish. I was just going to say, Madam Chair, that sorry, I've just lost my train of thought now too. Given the complexities of, like, we haven't just got one particular area of concern that's come through and all that discussion in the other piece, and I think that almost makes it binary from my point of view. Either we accept it or we don't, because there's so many different angles that we're looking at in terms of like that deferral piece and renegotiating. I think it'll be very complicated. So, yeah, in my point of view, I think it's either approve or decline, and we keep it at that level. Not sure if that's shared by anyone else.
So we're about to put that unless there's an amendment. Someone wants to move an amendment to that, to F. Okay, so then if we put F now, so please raise your hands.
Is it going to be approve or decline?
Well, if I go with approve first, then that'll tell us where there is majority. So can you please raise your hands if you wish to approve the issuing of a licence to occupy 2 floating sauna limited for a floating sauna on Lake Henry on Ivan Wilson Park, Te Anau. So that's if you agree to approve. Please raise your hand. So can you please raise your hand if your decision is to decline the issuing of a licence to occupy 2 floating sauna limited for a floating sauna on Lake Henry in Ivan Wilson Park, Te Anau. that is carried. I didn't ask if anybody was against, contrary. Okay, thank you. And then we move to G.
That would be redundant now, wouldn't it?
Oh, yes. There's no longer valid. So that has completed this paper in the deliberations. Thank you. I wish to note the extensive work that has been undertaken in relation to this application by notably Megan and in support of Kevin, because it has been considerable, and I know the time that she put into this paper and ensuring that everybody's submissions were acknowledged in this paper and supported us being enabled to make this decision today. It's been no mean feat, and I'm sure it has kept her awake at night. And she was given her support and Sam. So it has been an extensive process. I appreciate that you have gone into this. And as much as we may have disagreed with some of your recommendations, we understand how you got to that position of recommending an option. Because of the clarity in the paper you provided, we were able to consider those in full and in a deliberate way, which was really important as well. I thank the councillors for the time that they have put into both the reading and the hearing of submissions where councillors are able to attend. And as noted in here in D, we thank the members of the public who made written and oral submissions on the matter. Yes, and thank you particularly for your time. So that finishes that. Now, I was intending to consider a public excluded matter before lunch. That matter needs to come before us with a report from a person who needs to catch a plane and may well have departed for the plane. I don't know how we are going to attend to that. Is somebody else able to report on? I believe she's still present. She'll be gone by 2. She'll be gone by 2. Okay, so we can have a short lunch. So if we're back at 22:02, will that allow us to consider? Time to consider the matter, which you've actually heard before, so will that be okay? Yeah. All right, so we'll break for lunch and then we'll go into public excluding. Thank you. A recommendation that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting. And that relates to 9.1 community facilities and district-wide contracts and 9.2 Belford subdivision. The general subject of each matter is to be considered while the public is excluded, and the reason for passing this resolution is in relation to each matter. And the specific grounds under section 48(1) of the Local Government Official Information Act and Meetings Act 1987 for passing on this resolution are as follows, and noted in the council agenda. So again, around the community facilities and district-wide contracts and Belford subdivision. And I have a mover that we find public excluded. Thank you, Councillor Spraggin, and seconder, Councillor Keast. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Carried. All right, so. Yeah, sounds better. Alex, major achievement. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been a long time since we went and had a look at Kruger Street to get into this.
Thanks ever so much.
I'll go that way and Simon can go that way.
Thank you, everyone. So this report, I'll take it as being read, to request the Milford Community Trust CCO exemption continue. In June 23, Council approved that the Milford Community Trust would be an exempt CCO due to it being defined as a small organisation. Under the Local Government Act, we are required to review this every 3 years to make sure it still falls under that, which it is our current belief that it still does, as there hasn't been any change to the activity in the last 3 years. If council do decide to cancel the exemption, we will have to do additional reporting and get the have the accounts audited, which cost another about $5,000 a year. And with basically since COVID, since COVID, there's been no major income coming in. The concessionary income hasn't been charged, and there's been a bit of a change in all the trustees, which have just been appointed. Three were appointed last month. So yeah, at the moment there's no change in status. So it is important to note that you can change this at any time. We don't have to wait 3 years. So if the trustees decide to change the activity, we can change the exemption status. But for now, our recommendation is to keep it as status quo, because the cost of doing it will outweigh the benefit.
Questions? Councillor Groening, you were asking a question online which has been answered.
It's been answered.
Clarified.
And clarified. So that's all good, thank you. Just got an additional note here, but I'm trying to find the reference to it. The note that I've got, it said, the report says cost and funding for the operation come from Milford tourism operators, but that's not correct at this point because there is no income from
Correct.
operators.
I believe it just keeps getting deferred, so it's still recorded somewhere, but it's just not being charged.
Yeah, I noticed it was in the budgets, but it's not.
Yeah, I believe, I think Simon might be able to answer this, I think it just keeps getting deferred because a decision hasn't been up to made because it hasn't been acquired.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. Just a question around the, I think the last trust resolution to defer invoicing operators was, I'm losing my timeline now, it might not have been last year but the year before, and it was pending the outcome of Milford Opportunities and lots of things. So has there been any, with the new trustees being appointed and Milford Opportunities moving into next phases, has there been any view sought from the operators of whether they will accept being invoiced by the community trust again? It's been kind of not deferred, but not collected over the last, since 2020, I think it was. So is there any indication from those who traditionally bring the revenue to the trust, the other operators, whether they're going to be happy to, if invoicing starts up again, they'll be happy to be invoiced by the council and pay those costs?
But that was stopped at the time of COVID.
Correct.
Wasn't it?
I can answer that question.
Frank?
So the trustees have had an initial meeting, more on an informal basis at this point, just to get to know each other. And that was one of the things that was discussed. So that happened not last week, the week before, I think. There was some discussion around getting it started up again. But the trustees are mindful that we really need to engage with the Milford project as well, because a lot of the trustees are still very interested in building the recreation centre, but until the spatial planning is done as part of the Milford project, it's actually really hard to make any decisions in that space. So in the meantime, there's agreement at that meeting to do a little bit more work to survey who the previous people were, because there was some discussion around some people were not invoiced that operators thought should be invoiced. So there's a piece of work to actually carry on in the meantime until such time as the Milford project and the NCT can actually come together and discuss a meaningful and appropriate way forward following spatial planning.
Councillor Groening, did you want to add?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, ready to the resolution and the staff recommendations that council note the information contained in the report, and it shall be that the matter or decision of this report is assessed as being administrative but not significant based on our policies. And C, determine we've complied with the decision-making requirements of the Local Government Act as required. Note that, under B, I should have also highlighted it, therefore it's recommended by staff that council proceed with the approving Milford Community Trust being an exempt council-controlled organisation under Section 7 of the Local Government Act. Notes that in making the decision and recommendation E, it has considered the requirements of Section 7, Clause 3, and 7, Clause 5, subsections A and B of the Local Government Act 2002, having regard to the Trust being a small organisation, the nature and scope of its activities, and the cost and benefits of exemption. And E, we agree that the Milford Community Trust continues to be an exempt council-controlled organisation. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Dobson. Second to Councillor Somerville. All in favour, please say yes.
Can I just make...
Sorry, I
just make a comment. Retrospectively, I should probably have declared an interest in this space. Can I do that retrospectively?
That interest is as chair of...
No, just as a trustee.
Right, as a trustee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to stand back from voting on this matter?
I have no pecuniary interest in the trust, so
I'll leave it there as declared.
With voting.
So those to the contrary, no? All right, declare the motion carried. All right, so bridge weight 637. So,
Thank you, Madam Chair. With us, we've got Ian Southland as well, and he'll introduce himself in due course. But I just thought I'd open with the paper a little bit and let the experts get onto it. So as a road controlling authority, council must confirm at least annually any weight limit posting necessary for bridges on our network, and where appropriate, revoke any restrictions which no longer apply. So, as you're aware, we've had a significant bridge program over the last 9 years that we've been working on and are still working on. And you'll know that those bridges, just recently we've gone out to procure 23 bridges, which is our largest bridge procurement package that we've done over that 9-year period. In fact, there's 2 extra, I think, with 2 that were procured in conjunction with Gore, so that was 25 in total, but 2 of those are Gore-related ones. And the next financial year, that's quite obviously it spans over this financial year and next financial year. So in terms of there will continue to be those improvements made as we go through and deliver those bridges over the next wee while. But essentially the weight posting limits, it's important that annually we make this review. So it's, for those new councillors, this is an annual thing we do. This essentially illustrates that the progress is being made over the program. We've now got it reduced down to proposed postings down to 37. And I think over the 9 years, there was 115 bridges that were posted, so that's a significant reduction that's been made over that period of time and over that full program. So we've definitely been, as a council, tackling that head on and making sure that we're making great progress, which is the team have been doing. But I will hand over to Ian and to Hartley, and I think want to do a little intro to those, because we've got 3 new elected members from last time, so and work through the detail and some of the recommendation.
So my name's Ian Southland, and I work for a company called WSP. So I'm a structural engineer with WSP, and my role in helping Hartley and his team with the bridges is the bridge inspection engineer. And so we actually inspect all of SDC's bridges, 1,160-ish. And so we took on that contract in 2020, and so we've also been assisting with the posted bridge inspections just as part of that contract. And yeah, on what Fran said, it's commend the council on these improvements, because when we started there were 92, so there'd already been some replaced. Now we're down to that 37 number, with a few more to go this year and more committed for next year as well. So going well.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, just noting you said 1,160-ish. I hope you're not finding more as you try. Hartley.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was just going to add the comment, I suppose, that in addition to the report, I suppose that the proceeds are there as part of managing council's risk from a overloaded vehicle point of view or usage point of view, as well as what we can afford from a replacement program point of view. Can't replace them all in one hit, so it's just a pragmatic approach to trying to manage replacements versus risk. But yeah, that was probably the key highlights covered off, unless
I just had one comment to add, is that we will get to a point where we've replaced all the posted bridges that we can, as far as funding will allow potentially, because some of the posted bridges have no condition issues, and so it's hard to justify that, depending on where it is and whether it's a dead end road or those sorts of things. So we're getting down to what will be the natural level at maybe around that 15-20 sort of mark. Yeah.
I don't know whether any new councillors have a question on the central on bridge restriction, but please raise your hand. Councillor Summerall.
I just have a question around it. Has there ever been any incidents with the risk that's there where it's turned to crap on us? Has there been any incidents?
The biggest instance we have are vehicle versus bridge, so guardrails and handrails, and recent incident was the Weir Road bridge, not a posted bridge but a single lane bridge, where they took out the handrail for half of the bridge. As far as there hasn't been any collapses or horrible things in the period that we've been involved. Compliance is something that is always an issue.
I won't ask anyone that part.
Yeah, that's one of the issues we have had in the past, where it has resulted in us removing the bridge because of measures we've put in place to support compliance. Those measures have been continually removed to the point where the risk is too much, and we've actually ended up removing those bridges.
Any other questions? It's a very clear report. Thank you. Okay, so we move to the staff recommendation. Noting the information contained in the report, note that the matter or decision is assessed as being some importance but not significant in relation to our policies, and that therefore no engagement is needed to confirm the posted weight limits, and that we have complied with the decision-making requirements of the Local Government Act, and we don't need any more information. And we agree to confirm that in accordance with the Transport Act 1962 and Heavy Motor Vehicle Regulations 1974, the maximum weight and speed limits for heavy motor vehicles on bridges as listed on the attached schedule, attachment A, be imposed. We agree to continue to rely on the central on-bridge restriction to limit posting restrictions, and continues to mitigate this risk through ongoing promotion of posting compliance. And we agree to notify the weight limits to the New Zealand Police, New Zealand Transport Agency, Road Transport Forum New Zealand Incorporated, and by public notice in daily newspapers and social media and our website. Any further discussion?
Just I might have missed this, the question on adding Taramoa West Plains Road to our list of bridges, but so is that still remaining under management of ICC? What's the rationale of it featuring on our list?
that it's, there's several bridges across, we got boundary bridges, so half the bridge is technically ours and half the bridge is another road controlling authorities. So we have a couple with Gore District Council, and we got a couple with Invercargill, and that's one of the ones with Invercargill, but through an agreement, they are responsible for the day-to-day management, etc. But because it's a boundary bridge, just to cover our bases, and yeah, we also note it.
Just the advertising of the weight restriction, not taking on management.
Yeah.
Provides clarity. It'd be better reported twice than not at all.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, that just a query around the advertising item and wondering, do we actually promote it to the transport companies, that particularly those ones that are located near the actual bridges, remaining bridges?
We have, we've got a list, I suppose, of heavy vehicle operators that we've built up over time, and we'll distribute it through that emailing list that we have. But in terms of specifically heavy vehicle operators outside of that list that might be adjacent to the bridge, not to date, we haven't. The list is quite extensive in terms of how we advertise or notify. But there's always a risk you'll never get 100% as soon as you try and effectively door knock. Yeah.
No, just thinking of they actually got something to say, look here, because by those bridges we've reduced the number. Again, it's a bit of a promotion thing of saying how well we've done. There's now still 37. Keep looking after them, check them out and make sure you know where they are.
I guess, and maybe adding to that list as you come across them, but yes, the marketing aspect of the work well done by the team and positive. All right, thank you. We got a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Dobson. All those in favour, please say yes. Those on the contrary? I declare the motion carried. And thank you for your time and for being here today too, Ed. And this is the last report? Yes.
Happy this afternoon.
Or have you got someone to
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, John's up on screen and Kevin's here as well, Madam Chair. So I'll just quickly cover off a few points and then we'll take questions. So for the new councillors, all of you, I believe, have been to Taramia, or the ones in the previous council have been to Taramia Point. The matter of a Marai there has been under discussion for some time. We received a letter from Naitahu in 2024 asking for progression on that matter. So the chief executive had responded back to say, in principle, we are in support and let us know when further work has to be done. The report outlines the background to it. The reserve is the property of Naitahu, but it is co-managed as a reserve by Southland District Council and Oraka Perima Board through a committee, and that committee is established under statute. So at this point in time, the new committee has met and the discussion has been about progressing this matter. There's an agreement in front of council. Council's been asked to be party to this agreement. The agreement talks about the fact that there will be a change to the reserve status for part of the reserve, and then it'll move in terms of management to Oraka Perima as opposed to the committee or the council. So that's the proposal in front of you. It is an agreement, so council is the signatory to it. What we're putting in front of you is, should you agree to this, you could could you let us know which way, and then can you please delegate authority to the CE? The report says CE, you could delegate authority to the CE and Mayor, or however you want to do that. We are also suggesting that because it's a change to reserve status, I know you've had lots of discussion about reserve management plans today and in the past. There is a clarification within the agreement that has been suggested, which says, just to clarify that before changing the status, can the committee please undergo the full process of consultation? And just a note in there that was also how we had understood the letter that came through from Tahoe back in 2024. So happy to take any questions, Madam Chair, or otherwise.
Does John want to add anything to the discussion?
John or Kevin, anything to add? Feel free.
That's all right, we're presuming not then. Questions?
Just before you start, I'll just declare an interest in that I'm on the management committee at Parramatta House Point.
Thank you.
As well as obviously the community board council nominee. So
you're standing back from voting?
Sorry?
Are you standing back from the discussion, or you feel you can?
Oh, well, no pecuniary interest. I'd like to vote if I could, but.
Yeah. All right, thank you. No, questions?
Paragraph number 31, where it says that Chair McCall asked the board for the feedback on the proposal and all were in support, but would like to make sure that the public road access is maintained, public toilets are installed, updated, and the seaward side of Taramia Bay remains open to public and is not for exclusive use by Tangata Whenua. Is there something specific we would need to put in, or how do we ensure that this is maintained? Is that at all possible, even, what is being asked?
Sure, I can speak to that if you wish.
Yeah.
The section 31 of the overall reserve is the area that in question that they are considering or wanting to change designation of to a local purpose reserve (Marai). Section 31 comes down to just above the road, so it doesn't actually encroach across the road. The toilet's another issue. I'll let Kevin speak to that perhaps. But there's actually, in addition to that, absolutely no desire to restrict any access to any other parts or even that part of the reserve.
I'd endorse that for the information I've had as well, confirming that there's a commitment to it being permanently still public accessible, etc. And the boundary is, as you say, on the north side of the road, so it doesn't affect the zone. Yeah.
Kevin, do you want
Yeah, the correct. The road is outside the section we're talking about. And ultimately, it's not changing the designation or the reserve classification. It's how it's managed. It's being changed. We haven't seen the toilets will stay as part of that property. We haven't seen any details of a plan yet, but as noted, we would assume that plan would not touch that toilet block, but if that was going to happen, then there would be conversations at that time. The principle, what we're talking about now is the precursing ability for that stuff to happen. Yeah.
question? Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you. Well, my sense is it's very well supported out there, and just to confirm that the section remaining on the Section 31 remains under the management of this House Management Committee and open access to everyone.
Yes, where the road is road, so that's public access. It's not part of the generally it's on the legal road, which is public access. The balance of the reserve outside Section 31 is going to continue to be managed by that committee as if it is a recreation reserve, and there is public access rights that are applied to recreation reserves. So that won't change. It's only the Section 31 that will change.
Through you, Madam Chair, the proposal in here is that before the change to agreement allows for a full consultation process to happen prior to the changes. So one would assume that what that would mean is if there are matters to discuss, then that would come up through that process. Would be
The consultation process happens as part of the reserve management plan review.
So the use of the reserve and what could be done there, or the extent to which it would be allowed, would be part of that process.
The plans, as I understand it, is the review of the reserve management plan would only be as a minimum, to change that section 31 is to be managed as if it's a local purpose reserve Marai site under the control of the Upper Rinaka. The rest of the reserve and the rest of the reserve management plan would remain as is. It's only a review to reflect that change has happened. Because at the moment, the reserve management plan says it's all managed by the committee, and it's managed as if it's a recreation reserve. So what will happen is there will be a gazette notice issued by the minister to change the requirements that it gets managed as a local purpose reserve Marai site, and the administration of section 31 being the Runaka. Once that's done, then the reserve management plan will be reviewed to reflect that change.
Which will undergo a public consultation process.
Which is the changes to the agreement that we are saying is a requirement, as that is in line with the proposal that was originally presented to Council, and for which Council went back and said we agree on that basis.
Is that as clear as mud, or are there further questions?
Thank you. The requirement to consult, is that the government requirement as part of changing this Reserve Act, Section 31?
In terms of the Reserves Act, and if you just bear with me a moment, Madam Chair, to go through this. There is no requirement to do a reserve management plan for local purpose reserves unless the Minister directs so. As part of this process, if you look at the changes to the agreement, it's saying that it gets changed to a local purpose reserve Marai site, and that the management plan is to be reviewed as if it's been directed by the Minister. The Minister, in requiring a review of the plan, can also require that a review of the plan be publicly notified, because there is a provision in the Act that says the administering body, if it's a non-comprehensive review, if it's a comprehensive review, it's got to be publicly notified. But the administering body may, if it's deemed to be a non-comprehensive review, choose to not publicly notify it. What we are saying is that must be publicly notified, as was originally offered as part of the original intention, and that we're saying that the agreement needs to be amended to reflect that the Minister will require that the reserve management plan be publicly notified when it's reviewed, albeit it would potentially be seen as a non-comprehensive review, which could be decided by that administering body not to publicly notify. But if the Minister says you must publicly notify, then that's got to happen. It's welcome to my world.
Just come back to Councillor Byers. Has that answered your question?
No, I think I got two messages out of that.
Right. Perhaps you could
wanted to
elaborate on
know
your messages and ask the question.
Well, these were Kevin's messages. I'm receiving them. I'm wondering, where is the requirement to consult? Where's that coming from? Is that the council's asked as part of this agreement to consult, or is it the Minister as part of her role? Because then at the end you said there's not necessarily a need to consult.
The current reserve, the way our district plan is structured, it says that if a activity is contemplated within a reserve management plan, it becomes a permitted activity. Okay? The requirement to have a reserve management plan for the local purpose reserve doesn't need to happen unless the minister directs otherwise. What they're saying is the minister will direct that there is a reserve management plan for section 31. Okay. So to do that, they've got to amend or review the existing reserve management plan, as we're saying, by changing that part in the reserve management plan that says section 31 will be managed as if it is a local purpose reserve Marai site administered by the Araka Aparima Runaka. It is the management committee's decision as the administering body of that reserve to do the reserve management plan review. The Act says, in reviewing a reserve management plan, you shall publicly notify. However, if the administering body determines that it is not a comprehensive review of the reserve management plan, they may choose not to notify if it's a non-comprehensive review. What we're saying, as part of this whole process, that is non-negotiable for council, the minister must direct that it gets publicly notified. That is the guts of the change to that wording and that condition in that draft that was sent down, which was sent down saying the actual wording in this document is to be agreed between the Southland District Council and DOC. But when you read it as it was presented, there was no requirement for that reserve management plan to be publicly notified, which was in contradiction to the original letter we received from Ngāi Tahu to say it shall be publicly notified. This process will include a public notification process. What we're saying is by changing that clause in that agreement, that requires the reserve management plan amendment to be publicly notified.
Thank you, Kevin. So essentially you're saying there's not a choice.
Well, we're trying to take the choice out of it.
Yes.
Yep.
Any further questions?
Through you, Madam Chair, based on what you've just said and based on that recommendation for public notification, what sort of timeline would we be looking at?
For the public notification process? So should the committee decide that, well, firstly, there is the whole process of the minister saying yes, okay, and all the rest of it. But from more to go, we could start the public consultation in less than 3 months.
Okay.
And you saw the sauna process.
Exactly the same.
It's roughly that.
Okay. No, that's all. Thanks.
Any further questions? Thank you. And staff recommendation that council notes the information contained in the report, notes the matter of decision in this report is assessed as being of some importance but not significant based on our policies, determines that we've complied with the decision-making requirements of the Local Government Act for this decision. We don't need any more information. We agree to be a party to the agreement in relation to Taramea. Requires clause 2B of the agreement to be amended as per section 37 of this report. 2. The management plan for Taramea will continue to apply to and be required for the Marai site as if the minister had given a direction to the relevant parties under section 41(16) of the Reserves Act 1977. The management plan will be reviewed in relation to the Marai site to reflect the new local purpose Marai reserve status as if the minister had given a direction to the relevant parties under section 41(4) and 41(7) of the Reserves Act 1977, including the requirement to follow the procedure specified in subsections 5 and 6 of section 41 of the Reserves Act 1977. And we delegate authority to the Chief Executive to carry out discussions on the agreement in relation to Taramea and make any minor amendments that do not change the intent of this resolution B, and to subsequently sign the agreement in relation to Taramea. Right, let's have a mover. Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Beaupre. All those in favour, please say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed, please say no. I declare the motion carried. I declare the meeting closed and we will finish with Parakia. Right. Kia ora, kia rima, kia whakapapa, whanamo, kia moana, kei huarahi, mana toto, I te rangi nei, aroho atu, aroho mai, tātou, ia tātou katoa, hui e, hei kia. May peace be with you. May the sea be like greenstone, pathway for us all this day. We can show respect for each other, for one another, bind us all together. Thank you for your participation, but I'm going to beg a few more minutes of your time to close the meeting because Elizabeth has an update for us.
I have to leave.
My screen will be off.
I have to leave.